Her dream of the Iron Throne had been born in ashes and shaped by flame. She had crossed the sea with an army of freed slaves and Dothraki screamers, guided by prophecies of fire and blood. She had believed her destiny was written upon the backs of dragons. But destiny, Daenerys Targaryen learned, was as malleable and unpredictable as the hearts of men and women. Peace had never come easily to Westeros, nor to the Dragon Queen. Yet, as the snows of the north receded, and the living returned from the long night victorious, Daenerys found herself at a crossroads. She stood on the ramparts of the Red Keep, the wind tugging at her silver braids, a swirl of hot wind off Blackwater Bay mixing with the last vestiges of winter's chill. The city was quieter than she had ever heard it, and in the hush, she detected a shift in the currents of fate. When she peered down into the city, she could see the black scars left by dragonfire months before, the sagging remains of once proud towers. In the distance rose the sound of hammers and saws. Despite the war's devastation, there was rebuilding. Life continued. Her counselors had advised her to press her advantage. Some insisted Cersei Lannister was cowed, and could only be kept in check by the blade. Others said the lioness was cunning, that all illusions of peace were but lures in an elaborate trap. But Daenerys had lived with war for too long. She recognized a moment in which history might bend. If she pressed too harshly now, the realm would drown in blood and hate. She had no illusions that love alone would keep her on the throne. Yet perhaps fear and love in equal measure would give Westeros the chance it so desperately needed. She recalled the uneasy alliances formed before the Battle of Winterfell. Cersei had once promised troops to the North's cause, only to betray them. That betrayal remained fresh in the minds of many. But the threat of the White Walkers was gone now. The Long Night was defeated. The question lingering in the minds of every Westerosi was, what next? Would the kingdoms revert to their old cycles of vengeance and war, or could something new be forged from the shared tragedy? Daenerys turned from the view. Behind her, in the half-ruined gallery of the Red Keep, Tyrion Lannister waited. He looked thinner than he had months ago, though no less determined. Shadows of worry had carved new lines into his face. His clever mind had been turning over the possibilities of this peace for days. He had served kings and queens alike, and he had outlived them all so far. When he met her gaze, she noticed a flicker of guarded hope. "The meeting is set," Daenerys asked, aware her voice carried an unspoken tension. Tyrion nodded. "She arrives on the morrow. It seems she is traveling with only a small escort, her new Kingsguard, and half a company of Lannister soldiers. If the intent were betrayal, I would expect a larger force." Daenerys thought of Cersei, so proud and unyielding, the queen who would see her destroyed rather than kneel. Was it possible the proud lioness had truly softened enough to sit at a table and negotiate? Or was this the cunning trap that Daenerys' advisors feared? "She knows I have dragons," Daenerys said quietly. "She knows I have armies. Perhaps that is enough to reduce any cunning to caution." Tyrion exhaled, glancing up at the sky, as if to confirm whether any of the dragons circled overhead. A distant speck of black soared in the fading light. Drogon, the last truly mighty creature of his kind, with Rhaegal's wing mended, but still not entirely strong. Both dragons still patrolled the skies on Daenerys' orders. "I have known my sister all my life," Tyrion said. "Peace is not in her nature, yet desperation might force even the most stubborn to compromise. We should prepare for every contingency, but if you want peace, you must make it tempting enough for her to agree." Daenerys heard the caution in his voice. "If she tries to betray me?" His voice was grim. "Then we will answer in kind." As Daenerys turned away, she felt the first flicker of hope and fear dance in her chest. The wheel was turning. The realm was poised upon a blade's edge. She had pledged to break that wheel, not realizing how heavy it was, nor how many lives were bound to its spokes. Could she find the strength to break it differently now? Not through fire and blood, but through diplomacy and alliance? She retired to her private chambers to wait for the morrow's sun. Sleep eluded her, so instead she pored over accounts of grain distribution to the war-torn riverlands and northern provinces, scanning requests from lords who had once refused her. Support was growing, but so was the cost of maintaining an army large enough to discourage rebellion. Despite her dream of a benevolent reign, she realized the tasks of ruling were enormous. So many petty squabbles, so many wounded prideful lords, and so many hungry peasants with nowhere to plant their seeds. The realm needed peace. War had done nothing but ravage the fields and breed an endless cycle of vengeance. When she finally drifted into a fitful slumber, she dreamt of dragons dancing over a desert plain. She saw them devouring each other in a spiral of flame, caught in an unbroken circle of violence. Then a new figure emerged, a pale queen, taller than any woman she'd seen, her gown made of starlight. In the dream, Daenerys felt fear and wonder. She reached for the figure's hand, only to find that the pale queen's fingers were made of bones. With a silent, mournful cry, the pale queen began to crumble, turning to ash, leaving Daenerys alone under the sky. She woke in a cold sweat, heart pounding, certain it was some sort of omen. But for the life of her, she could not decipher its meaning. The next morning broke clear and bright, as if the day itself was blessing the possibility of new beginnings. Daenerys descended to the throne room. Her counselors gathered. Grey Worm stood rigid, his hand on the hilt of his spear, while Missandei waited at her side. The slender translator looked worried but determined. Perhaps she recalled the times Cersei had threatened them before. Varys lingered near a pillar, silent as a spider in the shadows, always observing. And Tyrion, her hand standing slightly in front, his face schooled to neutrality. In the echoing halls, the footsteps of the approaching party rang like distant drumbeats. Daenerys stood before the Iron Throne, that twisted mess of swords, once her greatest desire, yet now a mere symbol. She glanced at the black, sharp lines of it, remembering how her ancestor had forged it. 1,000 swords hammered into submission, forced to bow in their final shape. The realm was a reflection of that method, twisted and hammered by conquest. Could a new shape be made if the forging was done not by fire, but by words? The great doors parted, revealing Cersei Lannister, regal in a crimson gown. Her golden hair had grown out just enough to brush her shoulders. She was flanked by 2 members of her Queen's Guard in gilded plate, a few Lannister soldiers trailing behind. The Queen's green eyes flicked across the hall, assessing everything. Daenerys watched her steps, each carefully placed as though the floor might crack at the slightest misstep. Tyrion went forward. He bowed his head with careful politeness. "Your Grace," he said formally, though he was no longer addressing her by that title in his heart. Once he had called her sister, but that bond felt broken beyond recognition. Cersei inclined her head but did not return the courtesy verbally. Her gaze turned to Daenerys. For a moment they studied each other, 2 queens who had fought a war with more than steel, who had thrown every ounce of will behind their claims. Then quietly, Cersei lifted her chin. "Queen Daenerys," she said. Her voice lacked the mocking edge it had once carried. "I have come because I care for the realm, even if you believe otherwise." Daenerys tempered her own reaction, remembering the counsel of Tyrion and the longing in her own heart for something better. "We have both shed blood," she said softly. "Let us see if we can keep from shedding any more." The quiet that followed felt profound. Someone cleared his throat, likely one of Cersei's guards, but otherwise, the hall was so silent, Daenerys could hear the rustle of her own garments as she shifted. "I will not bend the knee," Cersei said. It was a statement that felt almost reflexive, as though she needed to assert that pride or risk unraveling. Daenerys inclined her head. "I have not asked you to." Cersei's eyes narrowed slightly, as though she'd expected a show of dominance. "Then what do you propose, Dragon Queen?" Tyrion answered before Daenerys could speak. "She suggests a truce, and more than that, a genuine peace. Each kingdom will maintain its autonomy, so long as it acknowledges a single high crown, one that stands for the prosperity of all." Cersei gave him a sour look. "Prosperity? That is what you said before, in the war councils. And yet I see rubble in the streets, and smell the stench of burning." "Nine. War is seldom kind," Tyrion replied. "But peace could be." For a long moment, Cersei said nothing. Daenerys felt her own pulse pounding. a strange sense of dread and possibility. If Cersei spat on her offer, Daenerys would have little choice but to use the might of her army to enforce her reign. There was no going back to the fractious arrangement that had ruled Westeros for centuries, not if she truly wanted to break the wheel. The realm was too fragile for further war. Yet it might come to that, if words failed. Finally, Cersei's voice emerged, quiet but cutting. "I will not grovel at your feet, Targaryen. But the truth is, we have a realm to rebuild, and gold is scarce. If this is to be peace, I will require certain guarantees." Daenerys inclined her head. "Name them." Cersei's lips parted, and she glanced at Tyrion. "First, that Lannister property, lands, mines, holdings, will remain ours. No distribution of wealth to pay for damages done in this war. My father built our fortune over decades. I will not see it squandered." "Now." There was a murmur among Daenerys' advisors, but she raised a hand. "We seek a settlement that benefits everyone, not penury. But the crown must levy fair taxes for the purpose of reconstruction. All great houses will contribute." Cersei's eyes flared a moment in annoyance. Then she inclined her head. "If every lord and lady pays, the Lannisters will do our share." "Agreed," Daenerys said. Cersei continued. "Next, I keep the title of Queen in the West, styling myself as a ruling head beneath the high crown. My banners remain mine." Tyrion exhaled. He glanced at Daenerys, who met his eyes. She remembered how the North had demanded its independence from her. It had not been an easy conversation then. But she also realized that new arrangements might keep the realm from further fracture. "What we propose," Tyrion began, "is a measure akin to the old Targaryen system. Each region retains a measure of self-rule, guided by the High Crown. The ultimate authority resides with Queen Daenerys. But we do not seek to trample on the traditions of each kingdom. You would be paramount over the Westerlands, subject to the unity of the realm under the Iron Throne." "But sin?" Cersei's lips curved in a wry, unpleasant smile. "So I remain queen in name at least, and vow fealty to you." Daenerys knew it was a delicate matter to address the concept of fealty outright. "You vow loyalty to the realm. I have no interest in diminishing the strength of the Westerlands if we can live in peace. You know as well as I that there are too many foes still lurking beyond our shores, and the scars of this war run deep. This realm needs every strong house to rebuild." "Well." For a second, Cersei did not speak. The tension in the throne room felt suffocating. Then she gave a clipped nod. "So be it. Peace, for the sake of the realm. But I still have concerns. The Tyrells are gone, the Martells nearly so. The Reach is in chaos. The Iron Islands remain uncertain. Who commands them now?" Tyrion smiled ruefully. "We have Yara Greyjoy allied to us, pledged to help preserve unity in the realm in exchange for a measure of autonomy for the Iron Islands. She is not fond of you, as you might expect." "Then—" Cersei's mouth tightened. "I care little for the Ironborn's opinion, but if they are content to raid my shores under the guise of autonomy, I cannot—" Daenerys raised her hand. "They will not. Yara has promised to cease reaving upon Westeros, so long as they are allowed to keep their old ways to a limited extent. We will draw up boundaries." Grey Worm took a small step forward as if sensing tension, but Daenerys gave him a reassuring glance. "There are countless details to negotiate," she said, turning back to Cersei. "But the question remains, are you willing to do this? Are you willing to stand beside me, not in defiance or treachery, but in genuine partnership, to rebuild the realm?" Cersei studied her face. For an instant, Daenerys thought she saw a flicker of exhaustion behind those cold green eyes. War had taken its toll on Cersei. She had lost so much: her children, her lover, her father's respect, when he lived, the loyalty of many lords. Perhaps she had reached the point where the cost of continued defiance outweighed her pride. "It seems I have little choice," Cersei said. "If I rise up, I will be crushed by your dragons. If I accept, I remain alive, and House Lannister survives." Her lips twisted. "The outcome is clear enough. Very well, Daenerys of House Targaryen, I accept your truce and offer of a shared crown. Let us see if the land can heal under your benevolent rule. Daenerys allowed herself a small measure of relief. This was but the first step, but it was monumental. She thought of all the pain that might be avoided if this truly worked. You will not regret it, she said, though she knew well that regrets and alliances often went hand in hand. Cersei cast one last look at the Iron Throne, that seat of sharp edges, forged by conquest. Then she withdrew with her guards, departing the chamber. Daenerys only allowed herself to exhale once the echo of footsteps died away. She glanced at Tyrion, who met her look with tentative hope. Perhaps peace was truly at hand, if they navigated the next steps carefully. The negotiations that followed were measured in days and weeks, rather than hours. Cersei installed herself temporarily in the old Tower of the Hand, separate from Daenerys' retinue in Maegor's Holdfast. The presence of the two queens in the same castle was tense, but they managed. Each day, a newly convened small council met, featuring Tyrion, Varys, Grey Worm, and Missandei on Daenerys' side, with Cersei, Qyburn, a handful of Lannister advisors, and the unrelenting gaze of the Queensguard on the other. They debated taxes, the distribution of resources, the station of the City Watch, and the coordination of armies. They discussed the reconstruction of the Crown lands and the shipping lanes in Blackwater Bay, which were critical for trade. All the while, Daenerys found herself balancing an internal conflict. Part of her wanted to trust in the possibility of a new Westeros, while another part remembered how Cersei once arranged the deaths of her enemies and had nearly succeeded in destroying the city, rather than surrender it. But the more they worked side by side, the more Daenerys saw cracks in Cersei's armor. At times, it seemed as if Cersei was weary. Whether that fatigue was genuine or a ruse was harder to discern. The old lion had lost her cubs, and the bitterness in her eyes was not something easily feigned. Tyrion approached his sister in measured increments, offering small kindnesses where he could. He reminded her of times when House Lannister had triumphed by compromise, rather than pure violence. She seldom responded with warmth, but she did not throw his attempts back in his face either. That small shift suggested a possibility that, for once, her cunning might be allied to a cause other than destruction. Daenerys also had to contend with the North. Jon Snow, now king in the North in name, if not in absolute practice, had also come south to see how the realm was shaping under Daenerys' new direction. His presence reminded her of the vow she had made, to stand for all the living, to unify Westeros. He and Sansa, the Lady of Winterfell, remained wary of Cersei, but they recognized the stark necessity of forging a lasting peace if the North was ever to recover from the devastation of the winter. One evening, Jon found Daenerys alone in the shattered courtyard behind the Red Keep. Construction scaffolding rose against the battered walls, and the clang of hammers resonated even past dusk. By the light of torches, her silver hair caught an otherworldly gleam. When he approached, she turned, relief softening her features. "It's not quite the homecoming you imagined, is it?" he asked quietly, glancing at the charred stones. Daenerys shook her head, her voice gentle. "I had visions of riding into King's Landing as a liberator, welcomed with open arms. Instead, it's all rubble and suspicion." She paused, eyes distant. "Yet if a truly lasting peace comes of this, perhaps it's worth the heartbreak." Jon studied her face, and she sensed a swirl of emotion in him. "I worry that Cersei is only making a show of this, that she waits until your guard is down to strike." "I worry about that too," Daenerys admitted. "But we cannot move forward if we remain frozen in mistrust. I learned that lesson in the North, when I asked your people to trust me. They were hesitant, but in the end we stood together. Maybe in time, all of Westeros can learn that lesson." Jon's eyes flicked away, as though uncertain how to voice his deeper thoughts. "I believe in you. If anyone can unite the realm, it's you." She noticed the sadness in his eyes. She thought of the secrets between them, the knowledge of his parentage that had changed things so drastically. But that truth had yet to be aired widely, and the question of claims to the throne had been put aside, at least publicly. They parted on thoughtful terms, each grappling with the burdens of the future. Slowly, the shape of peace began to emerge. Cersei, in a rare gesture, agreed to send wagons of grain from the old Reach storehouses to the battered north, on the condition that her caravans be offered safe passage. Daenerys, in turn, agreed to restore certain trade privileges to Lannisport, guaranteeing the Lannisters a needed source of revenue. A new sense of calm spread through King's Landing, as fewer soldiers prowled the streets and more artisans returned to rebuild. To celebrate these early successes, Tyrion proposed a modest feast in the throne room, or what was left of it. The hall was still lined with battered columns, part of the floor cracked from dragon fire. Yet they cleared enough space for trestle tables and flickering torches. Musicians played a subdued tune, and lords and ladies from various houses, some loyal to Daenerys, others to Cersei, mingled awkwardly. Wine flowed, though not as abundantly as in the days of old, and there was no extravagance in the menu: roasted vegetables, freshly caught fish, and bread from the newly reopened bakeries. Daenerys presided at a high table, with Missandei and Grey Worm near her, and an empty seat to her left that might have once been for Ser Jorah Mormont, if fate had been kinder. She lifted a small cup, gazing over the assembly with a sense of cautious optimism. Cersei sat at another table, flanked by her guards, speaking little. Yet she was there, not locked away with her bitterness, and that was progress in itself. The chatter that rose in the hall was uneasy, but real. People who had once planned each other's demise were now sharing a meal. Daenerys recognized faces from the Stormlands, the Vale, and Dorne Aride. Some had come to see whether this new queen truly had the capacity to unify the realm, or if she was simply the harbinger of the next war. For her part, Daenerys tried to speak with them, all while balancing the tension of hosting such a diverse gathering. After the feast, while the hall was emptying, and people prepared to return to their camps or chambers, Cersei approached Daenerys. She walked with a measured tread, her face unreadable. "You intend to hold a royal progress through the southern kingdoms once the city is stable," Cersei said. "So your hand tells me." Daenerys nodded. "Yes. If we want the realm to truly see us as a unified force, we must travel together. Show them that House Targaryen and House Lannister can stand side by side." Cersei's lips quirked in a mirthless smile. "I never imagined I would be part of any such demonstration. But if it reassures the lords of the Reach and the Stormlands that their new queen is not a monster who burns cities for sport, perhaps it's worth the inconvenience." "Never." Daenerys bristled slightly. She had come to King's Landing with a desire to liberate it, but the casualties had been steep. "I regret the destruction," she said quietly, "but not the cause. You refuse to yield." Cersei's gaze hardened. "I will never regret defending what was mine." There was a taut silence, filled with the memory of a million unspoken wrongs. The moment stretched, threatening to snap. Then, surprisingly, it was Cersei who let the tension fall away with a tired shrug. She turned to go, but cast one final look over her shoulder. "Try to remember, Targaryen," she said softly. "Even in peace, this realm can be cruel." And with that, she left. Despite the disquiet Cersei always stirred in her, Daenerys felt the spark of determination. She had come this far. She would not falter. She ascended to the battered battlements, gazing out over King's Landing under moonlight, listening to the hush broken by the occasional cry in the streets. The dragons roosted somewhere in the darkness, slumbering, trusting in her command. She wondered if they sensed the shift in her heart, a shift from vengeance to compassion, from conquest to rebuilding. She prayed that she could hold on to that shift long enough to truly heal the realm. Word spread through the Seven Kingdoms that the Dragon Queen and the Lioness had forged a tentative alliance, sealed by mutual need. Reactions were mixed. In the north, many called for caution, mistrusting any promise from a Lannister. In the Riverlands, battered by countless invasions, local lords expressed a weariness with war, and a faint glimmer of hope that peace might actually endure. In the Vale, the Regency under Lord Jon Royce was preoccupied with internal matters, but they sent word of cautious acceptance, for they were more concerned about potential Ironborn raids on their coasts. In Dorne, The scattered remnants of House Martell seethed with anger over past betrayals, but they too recognized that open rebellion would gain little in the face of dragonfire. So the realm paused in a tenuous suspension, uncertain whether to rejoice or hide. In the months that followed, the royal progress took shape. Daenerys traveled first to the Reach, accompanied by Cersei and a modest retinue of unsullied Lannister guards, and a handful of northern bannermen who wanted to bear witness to these events. Tyrion orchestrated each stop, ensuring that local lords were prepared with enough supplies to host them, and that the common folk could assemble to see the two queens. Daenerys flew ahead on Drogon sometimes, scanning the countryside. Far below, fields lay scorched or untended, but she saw new green shoots in places, signifying the land's resilience. Summer was returning, and with it, a chance at renewal. In Highgarden, the seat that once belonged to the Tyrells, Daenerys dismounted amid the crumbling rose gardens. Much of the splendor had been lost when the Lannisters sacked the stronghold, but the walls still stood. Servants wearing the green and gold of the Tyrell sigil led them in, offering bread and salt as custom demanded, though the true guardians of Highgarden were uncertain claimants and lesser lords. Without a recognized Tyrell heir, the fortress was in caretaker status. Tyrion oversaw a brief ceremony in the Great Hall, now sparsely furnished. Daenerys spoke of the Tyrell legacy, praising their love for music and harvest. She promised that the realm would help restore the farmland. Cersei stood by, at times wearing an inscrutable expression. The woman had orchestrated the downfall of Olenna Tyrell, yet here she was, standing as if in silent apology, but one the walls would never hear. The local lords listened warily, some bowing their heads, others still resentful. But if nothing else, they heard the promise of security and a stable rule. That night, Daenerys paced in a small chamber that overlooked the orchard of Highgarden, the sweet fragrance of blossoms drifting through the narrow window. Missandei had helped her out of her travel leathers and into a loose gown, but rest proved elusive. She found herself staring at the half-moon illuminating the orchard, lost in thought about how to truly unify a kingdom so fractured. Was it enough to show up and speak kind words, to levy fair taxes, to promise justice? The seeds of hatred had been sown deep over the years, and it would take more than a single harvest to uproot them. She heard a knock, and Missandei admitted Tyrion, who wore a weary but satisfied look. He sank into a chair, swirling a cup of wine. "They won't love us tomorrow," he said, "but at least they didn't chase us out with pitchforks." Daenerys smiled faintly. "That's progress, yes. As much as we can expect. The lords of the Reach have lost everything. The Tyrell family is all but gone. They have no real overlord besides the crown, and I think that suits them poorly. But if the crown extends a gentle hand, repairs roads, offers them loans to rebuild, perhaps we'll have loyal subjects." Daenerys glanced at the moonlight. "I truly don't want them to be just subjects," she said. "I want them to feel they belong, that this realm is theirs as much as it is mine. My ancestors ruled by fear and by the might of dragons. I believed in that once, but now I see that fear alone can't build anything lasting." Tyrion studied her. "A dragon queen with a conscience is precisely what Westeros has never had, and perhaps what it has always needed. Don't let that conscience falter, not even if Cersei tests your patience." "Oh." Daenerys nodded. "I won't." Tyrion left her alone, and she stood by the window for a long time, the cold stone sill biting into her palms. The next stops on their progress brought them through the Stormlands, where Gendry Baratheon, newly legitimized thanks to Daenerys' decree, had claimed some measure of leadership from the old seat of Storm's End. He received the traveling court with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Once a bastard blacksmith, he still did not quite feel comfortable in Lord's velvets, but the local bannermen had tentatively rallied to him. Daenerys appreciated his earnestness. It reminded her of simpler times, of the raw trust she once placed in her own destiny. Gendry's presence also helped soothe old tensions, for he had neither Cersei's cunning nor Daenerys' Targaryen name. He was an everyman's lord, forging new alliances at the smith's anvil rather than the battlefield. When they stood upon the ramparts of Storm's End, waves crashing below, the wind tearing at their hair, Daenerys and Cersei both looked out upon Shipbreaker Bay. The sea was alive with whitecaps, as it always was here, perpetually battered by storms. Gendry pointed out newly built ships that he planned to use to patrol the coastline, keeping pirates and Ironborn alike at bay. Cersei praised his initiative with polite restraint, acknowledging the advantage of a Baratheon presence. Daenerys could see the flicker of old memories in Cersei's eyes. Her first child, fathered by Robert Baratheon. The history between their houses was tangled beyond measure. Yet that evening, at a humble feast in the Great Hall of Storm's End, Daenerys noticed Cersei sipping her wine alone. If she felt anything for Gendry's ascendance, she did not show it openly. Daenerys, moved by an unspoken compassion, approached the lioness. In the torchlight, the golden shimmer of Cersei's hair had taken on a pale sheen as though touched by frost. "Lord Gendry has shown himself a promising leader," Daenerys offered. "His men trust him." Cersei's lips pressed together. "He reminds me of Robert in some ways," she replied, her tone acid. "Quick to laugh, quick to anger, full of energy. I wonder if he'll also succumb to drink and whores." Daenerys considered how to respond. "He's forging his own path. Perhaps that is all we can hope for from any lord." Cersei's gaze flicked to Daenerys. "Why do you speak to me of hope, Targaryen? We are enemies forced into an embrace." "Enemies," Daenerys said softly, "or partners, if we can set aside the past. We share a desire to see this kingdom stand on its own, strong enough to face any threat. The long night is over, but we know there are dangers across the sea. Roving pirates, plots from the free cities, old grudges that linger. We should be allies." "Oh." Cersei's expression hardened. She stared at Daenerys with something close to hatred, or perhaps longing for what she herself had lost. "Allies," she repeated. "There was a time I thought alliances were won by marriage or gold alone." She paused. "But you have undone so many norms, Targaryen." Daenerys said nothing. She sensed that even if Cersei joined her for the rest of this progress, the Lannister queen might never truly be a friend. But perhaps they could be something else, co-rulers who recognized they needed each other. Maybe that was enough. The progress continued. The final leg took them into Dorne. Much of Dorne was still reeling from the extermination of the Martell line, courtesy of Cersei. Daenerys remembered Illyria Sand's hatred, the cause of so much suffering. Yet, the Dornish lords had mostly retreated behind their deserts and passes, refusing to engage in the war's latter stages. Now, confronted with a Targaryen queen at their doorstep, they had to decide whether they could live under a foreign crown once again. To Daenerys' surprise, a small retinue of Dornish lords greeted them with tepid courtesy near the Prince's Pass. One man, Lord Corgil, stepped forward. He was an older fellow with silver in his beard, known for once supporting the Martells. "We know you have dragons," he said to Daenerys, and his tone was neither fearful nor awed, but matter-of-fact. "We know you have beaten the armies of the North, the Lannisters, and the dead themselves. So tell me, why should Dorne bow?" "Nandero." Daenerys held herself tall. "I have no wish to conquer Dorne. You are a proud people, and you have my respect. I come offering peace and unity, an alliance that ensures Dorne's autonomy, while recognizing a single high crown. You would be equals in the councils of the realm." Lord Corgil glanced at Cersei. "And what of her? She who tortured and killed the Princess of Dorne, who spilled Dornish blood in her dungeons." Cersei's face hardened, but Daenerys was the one to speak. "We cannot undo the past," she said, "but we can forge a future. I have demanded of Queen Cersei that all harm and hostility toward Dorne cease, with restitution for the families of those who suffered. She has agreed." "Naudin, sir." Cersei said nothing, but the muscle in her jaw clenched. The Dornish lords murmured amongst themselves. Then Lord Corgil spoke again. "I won't pretend to welcome her among us. But perhaps we can abide her so long as you hold her leash, Targaryen." A hush fell. Daenerys sensed the fire stirring in Cersei, bristling at the idea of being leashed. But if the lioness wanted peace, she would not lash out. And indeed, Cersei merely turned her gaze to the horizon, refusing to dignify the statement with a response. Thus, the royal progress concluded with a fragile acceptance from the Dornish. They would send an envoy to King's Landing to discuss terms of integration, ensuring that their border disputes with the Reach were settled, and that the old practice of ignoring the Iron Throne's writ might come to a quiet end. Daenerys could only hope the negotiations would not unravel into vengeance. In time, perhaps, trust could be earned. By the time Daenerys and Cersei returned to King's Landing, months had passed. The city showed signs of rebirth. Streets were cleared of rubble, new wooden structures sprang up, and the markets bustled with trade caravans again. The people still eyed the dragons warily whenever they soared overhead, but some had begun leaving scraps of meat in the fields outside the city to placate the beasts, almost like an offering. The Red Keep's repairs were underway, though the scars of fire remained. The new small council, consisting of Daenerys advisors, Cersei, a representative from the north, one from the Reach, one from Dorne, and others, met regularly to hammer out the final shape of the new governance. Some called it a reformed monarchy, others a coalition of kingdoms. Titles were argued over at length, as were the responsibilities each region had to the crown. For Daenerys, the details were exhausting, but necessary. She could no longer simply mount Drogon and solve problems with fire. If she wanted the realm to be at peace, she had to master the labyrinth of administration. Slowly, she and Cersei hammered out an agreement that recognized the North as semi-autonomous under the Stark banner, the Westerlands under Cersei's direct rule, the Vale under House Arryn's regent, the Riverlands under Edmure Tully's revived leadership, the Stormlands under Gendry Baratheon, the Reach under a council of local lords, until a suitable High Lord, and Dorne Islands under Yara Greyjoy. Over them all, Daenerys stood as the High Queen with the promise that she would respect the customs and independence of each region, so long as they paid their share of taxes, contributed men to a united army for external threats, and abided by the Crown's justice in inter-regional disputes. "If this works," Tyrion commented one evening, "it will be the greatest miracle in the history of Westeros, perhaps more impressive than rising from the dead, if I dare say so." Daenerys offered a faint smile. "If it fails," Tyrion's expression dimmed, "then we plunge into civil war again, and all this was for naught." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let's not let it fail." Days bled into weeks, and the final day of the grand signing arrived. The lords of Westeros gathered in King's Landing, a smaller but still formidable crowd. Daenerys presided in the throne room, though they had arranged a long table at the foot of the Iron Throne, a symbolic shift away from the Queen perched high above them. Cersei stood at her side, wearing Lannister red and gold, her eyes focused on the parchment that outlined the new governance. Tyrion read the terms in his clear, measured voice, while the lords listened, some with approval, some with stony acceptance. One by one, they came to sign or place their seal upon the parchment. The North, the Vale, the Riverlands, the Stormlands, the Iron Islands, Dorne. Even some who had not originally supported Daenerys grudgingly came forward, guided by the knowledge that peace was more profitable than war. Finally, it was Cersei's turn. She took the quill, glanced at Daenerys. For a moment Daenerys thought she saw the flicker of defiance. But Cersei pressed the quill to the parchment, and signed, her signature bold and precise. Then Daenerys took the quill and added her own name, Daenerys of the House Targaryen, the first of her name. The crowd exhaled, as if collectively releasing a breath held for far too long. A small ceremony followed, with modest applause, a few cheers, and more than a few uneasy glances. The deed was done. Westeros had a new structure of governance, a new compact between the houses and two queens, one as the High Crown, one as the Queen in the West, standing together at the realm's helm. That evening, the city celebrated in its own peculiar way. Taverns filled with common folk discussing the day's events, some excited, others skeptical. In the Red Keep, Tyrion hosted a smaller feast for the main signatories. Cersei attended, but she was quieter than usual, sipping her wine with a pensive look. Daenerys found herself seated next to Sansa Stark, who had come to witness the signing. The Lady of Winterfell exuded a cool dignity, her hair a fiery waterfall down her back. You've accomplished the impossible, Sansa commented in a low voice. You have united the 7 kingdoms. Well, 6 plus the North's partial autonomy, under a single banner for the first time in, perhaps ever. Daenerys gave a small sigh. I fear the threads holding it together are still thin. Sansa nodded gravely. But it is a start. Jon believes in you. Arya remains cautious, but she sees the change in the winds. As do I. They exchanged a small, understanding smile. Then a hush fell as Cersei rose to speak. The Lannister queen rarely made speeches of any length, so the attendees listened carefully. She stood at the head of the table, her cup held loosely in one hand. I have been many things, Cersei said. A queen, a mother, a prisoner, a victor, a vanquished. In my life I have seen more bloodshed than I care to recall. When I first sat the Iron Throne, I believed it was mine by right. No, I believed it was mine by cunning or by force or by destiny. I never expected to stand here tonight as a partner to another. She glanced at Daenerys. I will not pretend that I have forgotten our enmity. I will not pretend that I have forgiven. But the realm needs peace, and I am not so blind as to deny that. So, if this is what it takes for the next generation to live without constant fear and slaughter, let it be so. Nin. She lifted her cup. There was an awkward moment as the others tried to gauge her mood. Then Tyrion gently stood and raised his own cup. To peace, he said. Daenerys added her voice. To peace. And soon the others echoed it. They drank, though whether they believed in that toast, only the gods could say. Cersei sat again, her posture controlled. For the rest of the feast, she said little more. Daenerys sensed a turmoil in the woman. Was it guilt, regret, or just an acceptance of her changed station? She doubted she would ever truly know. But she hoped that perhaps a seed of something new had taken root even in Cersei's iron heart. In the weeks and months that followed, King's Landing continued its slow, steady recovery. The Red Keep bustled with bureaucrats, trade envoys, and smallfolk petitioners. The new alliance was tested daily by disputes over borders, taxes, and the leftover hostilities from the war. But each time an issue arose, Daenerys and her council convened, with Cersei present, to mediate. They hammered out decisions that satisfied no one perfectly, but ended bloodshed before it began anew. Little by little, that might become the foundation of a stable realm. Daenerys made a point of visiting the city often, speaking with shopkeepers and laborers, hearing their concerns. She did not shy away from the sorrow and anger that lingered. Some still blamed her for the destruction inflicted during the sack of King's Landing. Others, ironically, blamed Cersei for not surrendering sooner. The scars were deep, the fear real. Yet, Daenerys answered their questions with as much honesty as she could. She gave them her vow that never again would she let the dragons loose upon the innocent. That vow, more than anything, began to thaw hearts. And so the months turned to a year, and the first anniversary of the Great Council's signing approached. Lords and ladies arrived in King's Landing once again, this time not for war, but for a celebratory tourney, one that Daenerys grudgingly allowed, upon Tyrion's suggestion that the people needed a spectacle to rally their spirits. Knights from across the realm competed in jousts, archery, and melee. The stands were filled with cheering crowds, though the seats were not as full as they had been in the grander eras of Westeros. Rebuilding was still ongoing, and prosperity was modest. But the mood was festive in a way Daenerys had scarcely seen before. She watched from the royal box, with Missandei beside her, Grey Worm standing guard, and Tyrion and Varys close at hand. Cersei was also there, seated with a neutral expression, as armored knights clashed below. Her son, if he had lived, might have enjoyed such a display once. Perhaps the memory pained her. In a rare moment of kindness, Daenerys offered her the seat of honor, but Cersei declined. She preferred to sit off to the side, as though reminding the world she was not the High Queen, but still a monarch in her own right. The highlight of the day came when the final 2 jousters remained. One was Ser Brienne of Tarth, a towering figure in her gleaming armor, championing the newly anointed ideals of the crown. The other was a young knight from the Westerlands, ambitious and untested. They charged with all the fury of cavalry. The crowd roared as splinters flew from breaking lances. In the final pass, Brienne unhorsed her foe cleanly, leaving him tumbling across the dirt. A hush fell, then an eruption of applause swept the stands. Daenerys rose, a genuine smile lighting her face. Brienne, helm under her arm, approached the royal box. She bowed, her golden hair dark with sweat. "Your Grace," she said in her deep voice, "the victor of this tourney is at your service." Daenerys inclined her head. "You honor us with your skill and valor, Sir Brienne." Then she glanced at Cersei, inviting her to speak. For a moment, the Lannister queen seemed unsure. But she stood and offered a curt nod. "Your skill is renowned," she said stiffly. "Well done." Brienne's eyes flicked between them, and she bowed again, as the crowd cheered. It was a small symbolic moment, but as Daenerys looked upon the thousands of spectators, she felt the tingle of possibility. Here, under the hot sun, with two queens seated not as mortal enemies but as co-rulers, the people were cheering for a woman knight who had won fair and square. Times were changing, if only by inches. But change was real. When the tourney ended and the crowds dispersed, Daenerys lingered on the field, inhaling the scents of trampled grass and dust. The stands were emptying, the sun sinking below the city walls. Cersei approached at a measured pace, her footsteps muffled by the dirt. "Quite the spectacle," she said. Daenerys nodded. "Yes. I was skeptical at first, but Tyrion was right. Westeros needed something to celebrate." Daenerys. Cersei's green eyes wandered over the torn-up field. "Celebrations are fleeting," she said, her tone almost wistful. "But sometimes they help people forget the worst, even for a little while." Daenerys studied her. "Do you regret this peace, Cersei?" The lioness tilted her head. "Regret is a weak word for someone like me. But I understand the necessity of it. I have House Lannister to protect, and Lannisport has revived somewhat thanks to the Crown's trade concessions. My people do not starve. We have gold, we have grain. There have been no rebellions in the Westerlands. Peace has served us well enough. Though it is a constant battle of a different sort." "Memes. A battle of words and treaties," Daenerys said. "But better that than war." Cersei offered a slight shrug. "We shall see." Then her gaze fell upon a patch of battered ground. "I sometimes dream of my children," she said, voice so soft it might have been carried away by the breeze. "I wake up and remember, they're gone. Then I wonder if all I've done, all the cunning, the bloodshed, the alliances, was worth anything at all." "But I'm sure." Daenerys felt a pang of sympathy. She had lost a child too, Viserion, and the city she had once hoped would welcome her had instead suffered under dragonfire. "We cannot change what happened," Daenerys said gently, "but we can shape what is to come." Cersei closed her eyes briefly, then opened them, as though steeling herself against vulnerability. "Yes," she murmured. "We can." With that, she turned and walked away, her dark cloak trailing over the ground. Daenerys watched her go, a swirl of conflicting emotions in her heart. She knew she would never fully trust Cersei, nor would Cersei trust her. But perhaps that no longer mattered. They stood on the same side now, bound by the realm's need for peace, tethered by treaties, by necessity, by the knowledge that breaking this alliance would plunge Westeros back into chaos. And so the days continued, a slow shifting of the wheel that Daenerys had once sworn to break. In a sense, she had broken it, and in another sense, she had merely reshaped it, forging new spokes, new alliances, new lines of power. But the old cycle of vengeance and war had been stalled, at least for the moment, replaced by negotiations and uneasy truces. Dorne was still watchful, the Iron Islands still restless, and the North still proud. The Westerlands had their lioness, the Stormlands their new Baratheon. The Vale watched from its heights, the Riverlands mended their fields. And in King's Landing, a Targaryen sat upon the Iron Throne with a Lannister beside her, forging a fragile unity from the shards of old resentments. On one bright day, Daenerys rode Drogon over the city, circling above the columns of smoke that rose from forges and cookfires, not from war. She felt the dragon's heartbeat beneath her, powerful and ancient. The city below seemed both small and vast. Thousands of souls living their lives, building, hoping, arguing, trading. She thought of the many lives lost in her quest, the many hearts broken by the wars, the children who would grow up never knowing the horrors their parents had endured. As she guided Drogon higher, the city became a tapestry of red roofs and winding streets, with the sparkling waters of Blackwater Bay beyond. For a moment, she closed her eyes and simply let the wind whip across her face. She had dreamed of conquest all her life, thinking that only by conquering could she bring her brand of justice. But she had learned that conquest was only the beginning. What came after, the forging of peace, was harder and more crucial. When she landed outside the city walls and dismounted, Drogon settled behind her with a rumble. She ran her hand along his scales, feeling the warmth beneath them. Even the mightiest creature could not bring lasting peace through fear alone, she reflected. It took compassion, compromise, and the willingness to see an enemy's face and recognize a fellow human being. It took a bridging of differences, even when that bridge stood on the bones of history. In the twilight she returned to the Red Keep, where her advisors awaited with new petitions and problems. She found Cersei in one of the smaller council chambers, examining a map of the shipping lanes. The Lannister queen glanced up, her eyes narrowed in curiosity. "You're late," Cersei remarked. "We were to discuss a new approach to the Braavosi bankers." Daenerys removed her gloves. "Apologies." Drogon needed a flight. She came to the table, studying the lines of trade routes that laced across the narrow sea. "It seems the Braavosi are eager to lend coin for our reconstruction." "Yes," Cersei said with a trace of irony. "They always are, if they see profit. They want to secure certain trade exclusives in return. We'll need to ensure that doesn't undercut our own merchants." Daenerys nodded. "We will. Let us draft the terms carefully." Then they got to work, side by side, each bending over the same parchments. They did not smile or laugh together as friends might, but they cooperated, each understanding the other's intelligence and will. If someone had told Daenerys years ago that she would sit in a room with Cersei Lannister, forging financial treaties to rebuild Westeros, she would have called it madness. But here they were, united in the quiet, determined labor of leadership. Night fell, and the candles burned low. Tyrion arrived, offered a jest about the lateness of the hour, and poured fresh wine. They broke only briefly for a meal, then resumed. By the time they concluded, they had the framework for a new pact with the Iron Bank. Cersei leaned back, massaging her temples. Daenerys rolled up the parchments, feeling the ache in her own eyes. Without a word, they left the chamber together, walking down the dim corridor lit by flickering torches. At the junction, they paused. Cersei's apartments were to the left, Daenerys to the right. For a moment, they regarded each other. "We'll finalize the terms in the morning," Daenerys said. Cersei inclined her head. "Yes. Good night, Queen Daenerys." Daenerys replied, "Good night, Queen Cersei." They parted, each swallowed by the shadows of the castle. Yet in that small moment of parting, Daenerys felt a sense of something monumental. Two forces in balance, after so much strife. It was not love, nor was it trust, but it was a peace, however fragile, that might just hold the realm together. Days turned into another cycle of the moon, and so it went. The petty lords squabbled, the taxes were collected, the roads were patrolled, and the seeds of next spring's harvest were sown. Missandei, ever efficient, kept track of letters from every corner of the realm. Varys maintained his network, whispering rumors of plots that might arise, but so far, none had materialized into a true threat. Grey Worm oversaw the Unsullied stationed at strategic points in the Crown Lands, making certain no insurgency threatened the city. And Cersei, for her part, journeyed twice to Casterly Rock, ensuring the Westerlands remained stable. Each time she returned to King's Landing, her presence a reminder of the delicate dance between the two queens. Over time, the city folk grew used to seeing Cersei and Daenerys in the same carriage during processions, or the same dais during official ceremonies. Jokes spread about the two-headed dragon, though few dared repeat them within the walls of the Red Keep. But there was a begrudging acceptance that maybe, just maybe, this arrangement was working. Fewer battles, more trade, fewer burnt fields, more coin in pockets. The common people at least appreciated that. And in the quiet hours of the night, Daenerys sometimes thought of all that had come before. The exiled girl in Essos, the mother of dragons who burned cities, the breaker of chains who lost herself in vengeance. She thought of how perilously close she had come to unleashing her wrath upon King's Landing in a far more terrible fashion. If not for the pleas of her advisers, the love of those who believed in her better nature, the fierce memory of her lost children, both human and draconic, would she have been a tyrant herself? The line between savior and destroyer was thin indeed. But now, she had chosen a different path, forging an alliance with the one person she had once most despised. It was not an easy path. No one wrote songs about the days and nights spent quelling arguments over import taxes or awarding property disputes. Yet this was the labor of a queen who truly wanted to unite the realm. It was more grueling than any battlefield, and yet also more rewarding, for each day that passed without the clang of swords was a day the realm healed. Eventually the nights grew longer, a sign that autumn was marching in. On one crisp evening Daenerys found herself on a balcony overlooking the Blackwater. The sky turned orange with sunset. She heard a soft step behind her and turned to find Jon Snow. He had just arrived from the north, and his cloak was still flecked with dust from his travels. "You look troubled," he said gently. Daenerys attempted a half smile. "Do I?" she exhaled. "I was thinking about the future. There's so much yet to do. Rebuilding the fleets, ensuring harvests are fair, dealing with the freed cities across the sea who might try to sow discord. And I wonder, will one misstep shatter all of this?" Nunatwain. Jon stood beside her, looking out at the bay. "Peace is never a guarantee. It's something we must fight for every day in our own way. You've managed to keep Cersei at your side. That alone is a feat I once thought impossible." Daenerys folded her arms, feeling a chill in the breeze. "The realm is a tapestry of grudges, old alliances, new hopes, and uncertain loyalties. But I feel we stand on the edge of true possibility, something we can nurture, or something that can still slip away." Jon put a hand on hers. "You've given them a chance, Daenerys, a chance at peace. My father, Ned Stark, he always wanted a stable realm for his children. Sansa and Arya see it now too. Every kingdom is breathing easier." She felt tears threaten at the corners of her eyes, unbidden. Perhaps it was relief, or exhaustion, or a quiet joy that after so many storms, the sun was finally peeking through. "Thank you for saying that," she whispered. They stood in silence for a long moment, the wind tousling their hair. Then Jon cleared his throat. "I must go speak with Tyrion about some matter of trade, but I wanted to see you first." Daenerys nodded. "Go. We'll talk again soon." He left, and she remained on the balcony, gazing at the shimmer of light upon the water. Her thoughts drifted to the hopes she held for the realm. A unified Westeros, built on mutual respect among its houses, wise governance from the crown, and a promise of justice that did not discriminate between high-born and low. She knew it was an idealistic vision, but why else had she crossed the seas and risked everything? If she had abandoned her ideals, she would be no better than those who came before, spinning the wheel of tyranny and rebellion over and over. Sometime later, she heard new footsteps, an elegant, measured stride. Cersei emerged from the shadows, wearing a simpler gown than usual, though still in her house colors. "You spend a great deal of time staring at the city," Cersei said, sounding almost curious. "What do you see?" Daenerys glanced at her. "I see people trying to survive. I see hope. I see the future." Cersei's lip quirked. "Hope is a dangerous thing. It leads people to believe in fairy tales." "Ew." Daenerys offered a faint smile. "And yet, we stand here, two queens who were once mortal enemies. Some might call that a fairy tale." Cersei leaned against the stone rail, looking out over the bay. "If you say so, Targaryen." She paused. Then in a rare moment of frankness, she said quietly, "At least for now. The realm is at peace. I never thought I'd see it, Daenerys turned her gaze back to the water. For now, they stood side by side, each immersed in her own thoughts. Perhaps one day, some new storm would break. Perhaps old grudges or new ambitions would threaten this fragile unity. Yet in that moment, under the soft glow of twilight, they had forged a calm across the realm that had not been seen in living memory. Not because they loved each other, but because they recognized the necessity. And perhaps in time, something beyond necessity might grow. The gulls cried over the bay, the sea breeze whispered against the walls, and the city slept below, secure in the knowledge that war had receded beyond the horizon. Daenerys Targaryen, breaker of chains, sat the Iron Throne in shared power with the lioness who had once tried to destroy her. And in that tenuous, improbable alliance, they had given Westeros something precious and rare. The gift of peace, and the chance to imagine a world where the wheel had finally been reshaped into something more merciful. So ended the first phase of Daenerys' reign. Not in the roar of dragonfire consuming a capital city, but in the quiet forging of alliances, the signing of treaties, and the humbling realization that true power was found not in destruction, but in creation. The realm's scars might never fully heal, but for the first time in a generation, they had the opportunity to fade. And that, more than any throne or crown, was what truly mattered to the queen, who had once dreamed of fire and blood, and now dared to dream of peace. Daenerys Targaryen stood at her balcony the morning after that momentous twilight, overlooking the sea as sunlight began to dance across the black water. She could taste salt and the lingering memory of change upon her lips. For a long time, she had wondered if she would ever find peace, in herself or in the realm. But here it was, however tenuous. The city behind her still hummed with life, stirring awake to begin its daily chores. Bakers lit their ovens, fishermen set out for their catches, and guards made their rounds atop the rebuilt walls of King's Landing. She listened, sensing no shouts of riot, no rumble of war drums. There was only the ordinary bustle of an awakening capital, trying to find its footing in a new age. She left the balcony and stepped into her solar, where the deep blue tapestries swayed in a breeze smelling faintly of fresh mortar and stone. Repairs across the Red Keep had progressed enough that some wings looked almost new. This chamber was small, intimate, a place where she could gather her thoughts without the grandiosity of the throne room. There, spread across a table, lay a scattering of parchments, letters from lords in the Reach requesting seeds and tools, notices from Dorne about possible trade expansions, and a note from Yara Greyjoy about a renewed threat of pirates harassing shipping lanes. Peace, Daenerys thought, was not a constant but a delicate balancing act, requiring unrelenting care. She sighed and took her seat, scanning the first letter with an eye for detail. Missandei entered quietly, carrying a sheaf of fresh reports. In the sunlight that fell through the narrow windows, her warm complexion gleamed, and the presence of this steadfast companion gave Daenerys a moment of serenity. "Your Grace," Missandei said softly, placing the bundle of scrolls on the table. "Lord Royce from the Vale has requested an audience in the coming days. He wishes to speak of certain disputes between mountain clans and farmers in the foothills." Daenerys nodded. "Very well. Let us schedule him for tomorrow if possible. And the issue in the Iron Islands, any word on whether Yara Greyjoy has managed to capture or drive off the pirate?" "Then?" Missandei shook her head. "Not yet. We only have a short missive stating that she's preparing a punitive expedition. She requests the Crown's assistance, at least in coin, if not ships or men." Daenerys folded her hands on the table, considering. The treasury was no longer bursting with Lannister gold, as it had been in the days of Tywin, but it was not empty either. She remembered the negotiations with the Braavosi bankers. There was always more coin to be borrowed, though each debt gave the Iron Bank a fresh coil of power around the realm. "We may have to offer her some measure of coin or ships," Daenerys said. "If the pirates grow bolder, they'll threaten trade along the Sunset Sea, and that would hurt us all. Draft a letter for me. We'll promise some financial support, but we need more information on what these pirates are and who backs them. I sensed that they could be mercenaries in disguise or rogue sales from Essos. Missandei nodded, making a careful note. Understood. At that moment, a more peremptory knock sounded on the door, and Tyrion Lannister stepped in, his eyes lingering on Daenerys' face before he gave a polite nod to Missandei. He looked drawn, as though he had spent the night poring over countless documents, a not unlikely scenario. "Your Grace," he said, pressing a hand to his chest. "My apologies for the interruption. We have a development in the city that you should be aware of." Daenerys gestured for him to speak. Tyrion always arrived with a fresh tangle of problems, but his face was more solemn than usual, which gave her pause. He cleared his throat. "There has been an incident outside the Mudgate. Last night, a small crowd of common folk surrounded a cart that bore the lion sigil. They began hurling insults at the Lannister men driving it. When a scuffle broke out, the City Watch intervened. 2 were injured, 1 fatally." The Queen's jaw tightened. "And what instigated this unrest?" "The people are usually more concerned with their next meal than who brandishes which sigil." Then Tyrion rubbed his forehead. "Word has spread of certain taxes being raised in Lannisport, which fuels the rumor that the West is hoarding wealth while the rest of the realm rebuilds." The crowd felt slighted, worried the Lannisters might be returning to their old ways, extracting coin and letting others starve. Daenerys glanced at Missandei. "The old resentments run deep, even after all we've done these past months. I'll need to address this personally. If the people suspect that House Lannister is abusing them, our entire arrangement with Cersei could be undermined." She fixed Tyrion with a measured look. "Was anyone found at fault in the incident?" "The Watch arrested 2 men for inciting violence. One is a rabble-rouser from Fleabottom. The other claims to be a petty merchant who lost his family during the war. He's bitter about what happened under Lannister rule in the past." Tyrion hesitated. "He's not the only one who still harbors such bitterness. The city is tense." Daenerys stood, smoothing her tunic. "Then I shall go down to the marketplace and speak to them. The people must see that I am not blind to their grievances. Cersei's presence may inflame the situation, but I'll consult her if it becomes necessary." Tyrion inclined his head, though he wore a pained expression. "I'm not certain it's wise for you to go directly among the crowds, Your Grace. Tensions can boil over quickly. At the very least, take a strong guard. I have the Unsullied, and Grey Worm is always vigilant," Daenerys replied gently. "Besides, if I hide myself away in the Red Keep, how can I expect them to believe in my sincerity?" Tyrion sighed. "I understand. Let me arrange a discreet escort. You don't want to be parading like a conqueror, but you should not venture among them unguarded." A flicker of gratitude passed Daenerys' features. "Thank you, Tyrion. Missandei, please see to the letters first, then join me if you can." With that decided, Daenerys left the Solar to prepare. She donned a simpler garment than the ornate gown she wore for ceremonies, an understated black cloak over leather, practical boots, and only a small silver chain bearing the 3-headed dragon's sigil. She did not wish to broadcast power through finery. She wanted to appear as a ruler who cared enough to be approachable. Grey Worm and a contingent of Unsullied formed around her as she descended the castle steps, crossing the courtyard where the clank of armor mingled with the calls of stable hands. Carts laden with new timbers for repairs rumbled past. The air smelled of fresh sawn wood and tar. As she passed through the gate, she noticed Cersei Lannister emerging from a separate door, escorted by her own retinue. Their eyes met briefly across the courtyard, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. Cersei gave a small tilt of her head, as if to say, "I see you." Daenerys nodded in return. Then she continued on to the streets of King's Landing. The city had changed since she first arrived with dragonfire overhead. New stalls had sprung up like mushrooms after the rain, people jostling for space to sell produce or wares. Children wove through the crowds, hawking roasted nuts or sweetmeats. Daenerys found herself moved by the sheer industriousness of these folk, many of whom had survived the horrors of battle and still found it within them to start over. Yet, tension was palpable. Here and there, she saw men scowling at each other, a group of youths jeering at some Lannister soldier who strolled by on patrol. The soldier kept his eyes forward, ignoring the barbs. Daenerys advanced to a large square near the mud gate, known for its fish market. The smell of salted cod and pickled herring stung her nose. A hush fell when people recognized the silver-haired queen walking among them. Some drew back, uncertain whether to bow or spit. Others gave her respectful nods, though they wore guarded expressions. No one flung curses at her, at least. She came upon a cluster of city watchmen near a small dais, once used for auctions or announcements. Tension crackled in the air. The watchmen parted when they recognized her, eyes widening in deference. She surveyed the crowd. Perhaps 30 or 40 small folk gathered around, muttering to each other in low voices. When they saw Daenerys approaching, they quieted. A woman in an apron clutched a basket of half-rotten produce, eyes flicking from Daenerys' face to her dragon scale clasped to you all. A man with a missing hand stared, anger carved into the lines of his face. Daenerys took in these sights with a somber calm, then raised her voice so it would carry. I am told there was a disturbance here last night. I have come to understand why. No one replied immediately. A few scowled. Finally, the one-handed man spoke up in a harsh rasp. We don't trust them Lannister soldiers, he said. We lost too many to the Lion Banners. He spat on the ground. You may say we're at peace now, but tell me, where was that peace when my son died at the city walls, cut down by gold cloaks defending Queen Cersei? A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, subdued but real. Daenerys stepped forward, her cloak trailing over the uneven cobblestones. Grey Worm remained a vigilant presence beside her, but she gestured for him to stand down. I was not in King's Landing when the war's final battles were fought, she said gently, but I know you have seen terrible loss. If we remain divided by bitterness, though, we risk a return to the same bloodshed. I cannot bring back your son, but I can try to give the living a better future. That is why we have sought peace with Queen Cersei. I have sworn to hold her, and every lord and lady, to account should they abuse the people. A woman in the crowd, older than the rest, lifted her chin. Words, she said, trembling. All we hear are words from those in power, but the poor keep dying. How do we know this time will be any different? Daenerys' gaze flicked over the watchmen, then returned to the small folk. We have created a new council to oversee fair governance. The city watch is under the command of a man loyal to the crown, not to any one house. I have urged the distribution of coin to help rebuild burnt homes and businesses. More must be done, I know, but every day we strive to do it. We cannot succeed if the realm descends into chaos again. I need your help, too. We must move forward rather than— The one-handed man glared. Easy to say when the Lannisters still walk free. Daenerys' voice softened with compassion. I understand your anger, but if we keep fueling it, it will never stop burning. You want to fight them in the streets until the Watch imprisons you? Will that feed your family, or bring back your lost loved ones? Daenerys. He hesitated, jaw working as though chewing a bitter herb. Slowly, his anger deflated into a weary frustration. The crowd looked on, uncertain. In that hush, a child peeked out from behind a fishmonger's stall. Daenerys locked eyes with the girl, whose face was smeared with grime. She was clutching a small carved lion in one hand, perhaps found or stolen, while her other arm looped around a ragged cloth doll. Fear and curiosity mingled on her features. Daenerys, compelled by a surge of empathy, bent down so she was at the child's eye level. What's your name? She asked softly. The girl shrank back a little, but curiosity won out. Eleanor, she mumbled. Daenerys smiled. Eleanor, do you like living in King's Landing? A quick shake of the head. It's loud, and it smells bad. A gentle laugh rose from some of the onlookers, softening the tension. Daenerys chuckled as well. I can't argue with that, but maybe we can make it better. Would you like that? The girl nodded, fiddling with her wooden lion. Daenerys straightened, letting her gaze sweep the onlookers again. I need all of you to help me do that, by keeping peace with each other, by reporting abuses without raising pitchforks, by trusting that things can change. If the Lannisters act against the realm's good, or if any house does, I promise you, I will hold them accountable. For a moment, the The crowd digested her words. Then the older woman who had spoken earlier sighed and said, "Well, see, Your Grace, we'll see." It was not an enthusiastic endorsement, but it was something. The man with one hand still glowered, though his posture had softened from raw rage to grudging acceptance. Daenerys turned to the city watch captain. "See that any future shipments from Lannisport travel with a neutral escort, or are accompanied by the watch themselves, so there's no confusion or tension. We cannot have unrest sparking into riots over rumors." The captain saluted, relief visible in his eyes. Daenerys nodded to the crowd, then quietly made her way back toward the central avenue. The Unsullied parted for her with disciplined precision. She heard bits of murmured commentary following her, some skeptical, others hopeful. That was all she could do for now. Plant seeds, reassure, promise that she would not abandon them. As she wound her way back through the streets, she let her gaze wander. Here, a blacksmith hammered at a horseshoe, sweat pouring down his face. There, a mother scolded her child for trying to lift an apple from a vendor's stall. Farther on, a handful of sparrows, remnants of the faith militant, preached about charity, though they no longer carried weapons. Life, she realized, was 1,000 small struggles braided together. The weight of them pressed upon her shoulders like a physical burden. Yet, in spite of everything, a fragile hope endured. She sensed it in the way people hustled to build new roofs or open new shops, in the eagerness of children playing in the gutters. If she could preserve that spark, if she and Cersei together could keep that spark alive, then the realm might truly heal. Upon her return to the Red Keep's gate, she found Cersei waiting at the threshold, wearing a deceptively simple gown of deep burgundy, her hair brushed back in a style that accentuated the severity of her features. The moment Daenerys approached, the Lioness Queen's gaze flicked over the contingent of Unsullied, noting their number, reading their expressions. Cersei's own guards, clad in gold-enameled armor, stood behind her. 2 lines, 2 armed retinues, facing each other, yet both claimed loyalty to the same throne. "Out for a stroll in the markets?" Cersei asked, her tone neutral, but laced with her usual sardonic undercurrent. Daenerys took a breath. "I went to address the unrest near the Mudgate. A Lannister cart was attacked last night." "So I heard." Cersei did not look surprised. "You've spoken your piece, then. Did it change anything?" "I hope it has at least stemmed the tide of immediate violence," Daenerys replied carefully. "The people fear your soldiers. It will take time for them to let go of their anger." Cersei nodded, the corners of her mouth drawn. "And what do you propose? That I parade through the streets with them? Shake their hands, pat their heads, give them sweet smiles?" "Then," Daenerys regarded her, choosing her words, "I propose that we continue to show them our unit, that a Lannister soldier is the same as any other soldier sworn to the crown. That you, as Queen in the West, will not tolerate wanton cruelty any more than I will. If the people see your men practicing fairness or assisting with tasks around the city, it might quell suspicion." Cersei's lips curved in the faintest mirthless smile. "You think my presence might reassure them? I dare say most in this city still hate me." "No. They fear you more than they hate you," Daenerys corrected softly. "But fear can be softened if people see a different side." A moment of silence passed, as the Lioness studied the Dragon Queen. Then Cersei made a small gesture of acquiescence. "I've been meaning to send a regiment to assist with the further reconstruction of the city walls near Flea Bottom. If you think it will help, I can have them wear the royal sigil alongside the lion. It might show that they serve the realm, not just House Lannister." "New me." Daenerys recognized a significant concession in that statement. Cersei, giving up an element of pride for the sake of the alliance. "That would be appreciated." Cersei lifted her chin. "Then it shall be done." Without another word, she turned and strode inside, her guards moving in lockstep behind her. Daenerys watched her go, musing over the complexities bound up in that woman's every choice. Cersei was not a loving ally, nor even a friend, but she was, for now, a partner who saw logic in maintaining the peace. Daenerys would take that small favor as progress. She made her way through the torchlit corridors of the Red Keep. The stone felt cool despite the heat of the late morning sun. Murmured conversations echoed from hidden alcoves, servants carrying baskets of linens or trays of bread. Some bowed as she passed, though more often they averted their eyes. She could not blame them for their caution, given the realm's recent upheavals. When Daenerys reached her solar, she found Tyrion already there, waiting with a tense set to his shoulders. He had a habit of pacing when worried. She glanced at Missandei, who was busy sealing a letter, before turning her attention to the Lannister dwarf. "What news?" He turned, exhaling. "You should know that a delegation from the Braavosi bankers has arrived earlier than expected. They're pressing for an immediate audience to discuss the terms of our loans. And you should also know that Jon Snow has returned from the north, reporting new concerns about the wildlings and the unsettled frontier along the wall." Daenerys felt a flicker of sympathy for Jon. He had ventured back to Winterfell several times, trying to juggle his responsibilities as a Stark, albeit an acknowledged Targaryen in lineage, and the realm's broader concerns. "Let's address the Braavosi bankers first," she said. "I prefer we do not accumulate any more debt than necessary, but I also know reconstruction demands resources we currently lack." "Yes," Tyrion said. "They'll not let us forget that. Shall I summon them for a private audience? Or do you wish Cersei to be present?" Daenerys considered. The alliance with Cersei was strong enough now that excluding her might cause suspicion. But including her could complicate negotiations, given how the bankers might play one queen against the other. "Let's have a smaller audience," she decided. "Just you, me, and maybe Varys. Then we can inform Cersei of the result. The bankers thrive on sowing divisions. I'd rather show a united face after we've established terms among ourselves." Tyrion nodded, relief in his eyes. He bowed and left to make arrangements. Missandei handed Daenerys a fresh scroll. "This is the letter to Yara Greyjoy, Your Grace. I'll have it dispatched as soon as you sign." Daenerys quickly reviewed it, noting the formal offers of partial financial support and an insistence on updates regarding the pirates' origins. Satisfied, she scrawled her signature and pressed her seal in red wax. Missandei then excused herself to see it delivered to the ravens. Alone for a moment, Daenerys closed her eyes and leaned back in her chair, massaging the tension from her brow. Ruling by peace was more exhausting than the frenetic rush of war. War required fury, strategy, and courage, but peace required endless patience, empathy, and the willingness to face tedious or painful issues every day. Still, the memory of those battered small folk near the mud gate strengthened her resolve. She would not fail them by succumbing to frustration. Before long, Tyrion returned with a polite knock, followed by two sharply dressed men in Braavosi finery. Their doublets bore the sigil of the Iron Bank, a stylized coin in black and gold. Varys trailed them, quiet as a shadow. The Braavosi introduced themselves as Xaro Fair and Magister Rubino, each with carefully manicured beards and equally careful expressions. "Your Grace," said Xaro, bowing low, "we come bearing the utmost respect from the Iron Bank of Braavos. We are pleased to see the realm's stability has improved, a testament to your leadership." His eyes flicked around the solar, taking in the tapestries and the few sparse hints of wealth Daenerys had chosen to display. Daenerys inclined her head. "We are grateful for the Iron Bank's past assistance. Our realm's reconstruction continues, and we appreciate Braavos's confidence." "Narwen?" Xaro smiled. "Of course, confidence is our business. We extended substantial loans to your predecessor." Tyrion interjected smoothly, "which you know were repaid in part through certain golden shipments from the Westerlands. We are aware of the open balance, though it's considerably reduced since Cersei Lannister's reign of sole monarchy." Magister Rubino clicked his tongue. "A partial repayment, yes. But the bank expected continued interest and a reliable schedule. Now that you share governance, do we treat both queens equally? Or do we treat the High Crown as the prime borrower? The ledger must be precise." Napsimshire. Daenerys suspected their true game. They wanted to see if they could secure more favorable terms, or pit her and Cersei against each other. "The debt is the crown's, not a single house," she said firmly. "I intend to honor it. We request a small extension on the next interest payment, given the need to finance urgent reconstruction. In return, we will open additional trade routes to Braavosi merchant vessels." Nirwanamnimo. Zaro and Rubino exchanged a look that spoke volumes. They were not displeased, but they saw an opening for negotiation. "We are amenable to extended terms," Rubino said, "provided the Crown offers certain securities." Varys, who had been silent until then, spoke in his gentle, measured tone. "Securities in the form of property, or future shipments of resources from the newly restored mines in the Westerlands." Tyrion added, "There are also the Tyrell gold reserves we have begun uncovering in certain hidden vaults at Highgarden. Once properly inventoried, those could serve as collateral." Zaro's eyes glinted at the mention of potential Tyrell gold. "That might suffice, yes, if the Crown would grant the Iron Bank priority in all future shipments from Highgarden's region until the debt is settled. That would be an equitable exchange, wouldn't you agree?" "Let's see." Daenerys knew full well that letting the Braavosi intercept or prioritize shipping from Highgarden was risky, especially given how precarious the region still was. Yet refusing such terms might result in the Iron Bank pulling out entirely or raising interest exorbitantly. She glanced at Tyrion and Varys. Both men wore thoughtful, non-committal expressions. She then turned back to the Braavosi. "You seek exclusive shipping rights, or merely priority?" Zaro smiled benignly. "Priority, of course. We would not keep you from trading with others, merely ensure that any shipments designated for the Crown's debt be processed first." "No. Daenerys pressed her lips together. "We will consider that. However, we must ensure the local lords in the Reach retain enough resources to rebuild their own estates. Too much gold or grain siphoned away would harm the region, and by extension, the Crown's ability to repay." Rubino gave a theatrical sigh. "Naturally, we do not wish to kill the goose that lays golden eggs, so to speak. We can be flexible on the exact percentages. But we must see a contract that satisfies our concerns. A strong realm, we believe, will produce lasting profit. For you, and for us." Damtower. A short negotiation followed, with Tyrion showcasing his skill at balancing numbers, and Varys dropping subtle hints about other potential lines of credit if the Braavosi proved too inflexible. Daenerys occasionally interjected to ensure that these men did not demand more than the Crown could responsibly give. By the end of the discussion, they had a tentative arrangement. The Crown would continue to repay the Iron Bank with interest, but the next major payment would be delayed by 6 months in exchange for ensuring Braavosi's ships got priority at certain ports. They would set the exact ratio once the Highgarden vaults were catalogued. Daenerys rose, concluding the meeting with practiced graciousness. "We value our relationship with the Iron Bank. May both our fortunes prosper." Zaro and Rubino made their bows and departed, evidently pleased with themselves. Once the door closed, Daenerys sank into her chair with a tired sigh. "A partial victory at best. We keep them on our side but yield a portion of the Crown's independence." Tyrion shrugged. "That is the way of the Iron Bank. One never truly escapes their hold, only manages it." Varys offered a small smile. "But consider the alternative. If the Braavosi withdrew support, the realm's credit would plummet. Other banks would follow suit. We'd be left to finance everything through heavier taxes, which might spark more unrest. This was the best of several difficult choices." Daenerys nodded, though she felt a lingering frustration at how power so often came down to wealth. "Let us be certain to inform Cersei swiftly, so she does not hear it through rumor. She will want to know how the Westerland's new mines and any remaining Tyrell gold might be used as collateral." Tyrion's expression tightened at the mention of his sister. "I'll speak with her. She might grumble, but it's a necessary compromise. Better she hears it from me than from some Braavosi whisper." "Thank you," Daenerys said. With that settled, she left the Solar to check on another matter. She headed down a spiral staircase to a courtyard ringed by pale stone columns. The clang of steel greeted her. This was where the Unsullied trained alongside a cadre of new recruits from Westeros. Men and women who wished to learn disciplined warfare without the cruelty that had once shaped the Unsullied in Astapor. Grey Worm, tall and impassive, stood at the center, giving terse commands. The recruits ran drills with spears, forming tight phalanx lines. Their breathing labored as they worked to maintain unity. When Grey Worm noticed Daenerys, he signaled for the recruits to pause. Sweaty and flushed, they stood at attention, leaning on their spears. He approached her, bowing slightly. "Your Grace." "Grey Worm," she said in a warm tone. "How go the drills?" "They improve," he replied. "They lack the conditioning of the Unsullied, but they learn discipline. In time, they may be strong." "Meawomis." Daenerys surveyed the group, noticing how their tabards bore the insignia of the crown. A three-headed dragon, the subtle addition of a Lannister lion, and sometimes a direwolf, or a kraken, or a rose, depending on the region. A mosaic of houses under a single banner. This was the newly forming royal army, meant to represent unity rather than a single house might. The sight of them, diverse and determined, lifted her spirits. Good. Continue to shape them into a force that respects law, not fear. That is our hope. Grey Worm nodded. A flicker of emotion passed across his normally stoic features. "I hear men in the yard speak about the tension in the city, about the Lannisters and old grudges. Indeed. It's a delicate balance." She paused, studying Grey Worm's face. "How are you, my friend?" He hesitated, as if uncertain how to express himself. "I am well," he finally said. "Sometimes I miss Naeth, Miss Ande's home." She spoke of going there someday after the wars. He looked away, swallowing. "But I am needed here." Daenerys remembered Missandei's stories of her peaceful homeland, with its butterflies and beaches. She felt a pang for Grey Worm, who had lived a life of war and duty. Now even in peace, he could not fully rest. "One day," she said softly, "when the realm is stable enough, you shall go there. You can protect it from slavers and honor Missandei's dream." He lowered his gaze in gratitude, a rare moment of vulnerability. "Thank you, my queen." Daenerys placed a hand on his shoulder, letting silence speak for her compassion. Then she stepped back, inclining her head in farewell. Grey Worm pivoted sharply to resume training the recruits, calling them to attention. The clash of spears and shields resumed, echoing across the yard. In the corridors leading back to her chambers, Daenerys encountered Jon Snow. He stood with Sir Davos Seaworth, the two men conversing in hushed tones. At the sight of the queen, they straightened, inclining their heads politely. Jon's dark eyes were thoughtful, a small crease lining his brow. His northern cloak bore signs of long travel, mud along the hem, the edges worn. Yet he carried himself with quiet authority, the posture of a leader who had faced life and death more times than he cared to recount. "Your Grace," he said, voice low and a little hoarse. "I returned from the north last night. My apologies for not coming to you sooner." Daenerys waved away the apology. "I know how taxing the journey is. Are you well?" He nodded, though his expression remained grave. "Well enough. The north. The snows have finally receded beyond the neck, but the castle stewards at Winterfell are concerned about the next winter, whenever it may come. The harvests this year should be decent, but they worry about the possibility of future storms." Daenerys' gaze flicked to Sir Davos, who stroked his beard thoughtfully. He had once served Stannis Baratheon, but had become one of Jon's most trusted advisors. "Aye," Davos said. "The northern lords have always been cautious. They prefer to stockpile more than they need, given how harsh winters can be." Daenerys understood well that prudent measure. "If the north requires additional shipments of grain or supplies, we can arrange that with the Reach once their farms are at full yield again. We don't want the region to suffer." Nor. Jon inclined his head gratefully. "Thank you. I'm sure Sansa will be relieved to hear it. She's doing her best to manage Winterfell in my frequent absences. Which brings me to another matter. There have been raids along the Gift. Small bands, possibly brigands or stray wildlings, who refuse to come south of the Wall. We're not sure what they're after. They've stolen livestock and vanished. A few northern patrols have engaged them, but we can pin them down." Daenerys frowned. "The Wall is still manned by the Night's Watch, though fewer in number. Could these raiders be deserters from the Watch, or criminals from beyond the mountains?" "Hard to say," Jon replied. Tormund Giantsbane and the three folk who settled south of the wall have no knowledge of these new raiders. They suspect it might be some offshoot clan that never bent the knee, surviving in hidden valleys. We need more resources to root them out, or at least discover their motives. Sansa asked if the crown could spare any scouts or men. Daenerys considered. With so many demands on manpower, rebuilding, guarding the capital, patrolling trade routes, it would be a delicate task to send a sizable force up north. But ignoring the problem could let a small threat grow into something worse. I'll speak with Tyrion. Perhaps we can spare a detachment from the Vale or the Riverlands, men more accustomed to mountainous terrain. We must ensure the peace we're building here doesn't unravel in the far corners of the realm. Precisely, Jon said. Relief touched his features. I'll be heading north again soon, but I wanted to make sure you were aware. And, if I may speak with you in private at some point, about another matter. In the how? Daenerys nodded. Of course. Come to my chambers this evening if you wish. Jon gave her a grateful half-smile. She studied him for a moment, reminded of the complicated bond they shared. He was her nephew in blood, though that secret was not openly proclaimed. He bore the Targaryen name, though he seldom used it, preferring to remain known as Jon Snow, or sometimes Jon Stark. Their closeness had cooled in the wake of revelations and the turbulence of war, but a mutual respect and an old affection persisted between them, along with an unspoken tension neither had fully resolved. He bowed and took his leave, moving off with Sir Davos, their footsteps echoing down the hall. Daenerys lingered, watching them go, a swirl of thoughts rising within her. She wondered what private matter Jon wished to discuss. Perhaps it concerned the North's independence or the question of inheritance or something personal and fraught. Whatever it was, she silently braced herself. Ruling by peace meant navigating countless complexities, some as vast as trade routes, others as intimate as the ties of blood and loyalty between individuals. Not long after, she proceeded to the council chamber to meet with Tyrion, Varys, and a few selected officials. They reviewed the day's events, the tension at the Mudgate, the Braavosi negotiations, the need for men in the north. Then Cersei arrived, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. Tyrion carefully laid out the terms reached with the Iron Bank, explaining the priority shipping arrangement and the delayed interest payment. Cersei's face remained impassive. When he finished, she said, "So the crown has essentially pledged potential Tyrell gold to the Braavosi, in exchange for a bit of time and some shipping preferences. Has no one considered that the vaults at Highgarden may be nearly empty, or that the reserves might be scattered or claimed by bandits?" Tyrion swallowed. "We have reason to believe there's enough there to satisfy the bank. It was rumored that the Tyrells kept hidden caches. We'll know more once our surveyors finish their work." Enter Saul. Cersei's eyes narrowed. If that gold isn't enough, the Braavosi will expect more from the Westerlands. So once again, House Lannister shoulders the burden. Daenerys decided to speak before the discussion soured further. "We will ensure that it doesn't fall disproportionately on any single region. If the Tyrell gold fails to meet expectations, we can negotiate an alternate arrangement with the bankers. This alliance stands on the principle of shared responsibility." Darn. Cersei regarded her, then Tyrion, with a coldness that could have scalded. "See that it does not become a sly attempt to bleed my house dry." Tyrion took a controlled breath. "No one wants that. House Lannister's prosperity is part of the realm's stability." Varys intervened smoothly, his voice a calming ripple. "We will proceed carefully, step by step, ensuring no single region is overtaxed or overburdened. The bank's appetite is vast, but they benefit from our success. They will not push us into ruin." "Destin Mo." Cersei gave a slow nod, though she did not look entirely mollified. Daenerys understood her caution. Cersei was no fool, and she had witnessed betrayals from every side. Still, the tone of the meeting felt heavier than usual, as if the friction of old resentments threatened to spark. After a tense silence, the conversation turned to other matters. The rebuilding of the outer harbor, the reorganization of the city watch, and the upcoming progress through the Crown lands to inspect farmland yields. By the time the council dispersed, Daenerys' head throbbed with the weight of so many details. She parted ways with Cersei in the corridor outside, each offering a polite nod but little more. Then she made her way to her personal chambers, longing for a moment of quiet. The sun had dipped westward, casting the high windows in the keep with an amber glow. As promised, Jon Snow appeared that evening. Missandei let him in, then bowed out, leaving them alone in the softly lit antechamber. Jon carried an air of subdued determination. Daenerys invited him to sit at a small table near the hearth, where a simple supper had been laid: bread, cheese, and a flagon of wine. She poured 2 cups, offering him one. He accepted with a murmured thanks, then sipped, his gaze downcast. "You said you had a matter to discuss?" Daenerys prompted, folding her hands. Her own wine remained untouched. He nodded, setting his cup aside. "It's about the North and the question of successors." She felt her pulse quicken. "You mean your successor in the North, or—" He cleared his throat. "Both, actually. The lords back home keep asking who will follow me as king in the North, or Warden of the North, depending on how the titles evolve under this arrangement. Some think Sansa or Arya should be next in line. Others whisper about your own lineage, my lineage, what that implies for the future of the crown. They worry that if you and I both pass without an heir, who claims the Iron Throne?" Daenerys' mouth felt dry. She had always yearned for children, once believing she was unable to bear them. The losses of her dragons, the knowledge of her uncertain fertility, and the tragedies she had endured, these weighed on her heart. She looked away briefly. "You speak of a matter that has haunted me for some time. I have no living children, not by blood, at least. The realm is my child in many ways, but that's not the kind of succession the lords want." Jon nodded, sympathy in his eyes. "They worry about a new war if there's no clear line of inheritance. Some lords in the Vale have quietly suggested that if you remain childless, the throne should pass to me, because of my Targaryen blood, however complicated it is. Others say it should pass to House Baratheon, given Gendry's claim, and the old Targaryen-Baratheon ties. Yet others argue for House Stark, because of the North's pivotal role in fighting the dead. It's a mess of claims and ambitions." Daenerys let out a slow breath. "And Cersei has her own ideas, no doubt. House Lannister might press for their lineage to remain paramount in the West. She's officially recognized me as the High Queen, but that might change if there's no designated heir. I can see how the realm might splinter again once I'm gone." Jon hesitated, then ventured softly. "Have you given thought to marriage? A union that might produce an heir and silence these questions?" A flicker of old pain crossed her face. Once, she might have contemplated marriage with Jon himself, before the truth of his parentage and the chaos that followed. Now that path seemed fraught with 1,000 complications. "I have, but I see no easy solution. Any marriage I choose might alienate certain regions. And as for whether I can bear children, I do not know. The maesters say it's uncertain. It might still be possible, or it might never be." He frowned, picking at a piece of bread. "If you took a consort from one of the major houses, someone with widespread approval, perhaps it eased tensions. Even if no child comes from the union, it could solidify alliances." She looked at him, something bittersweet in her gaze. "Would that truly unite the realm, or simply shift alliances in favor of whichever house I wed into?" Jon looked away, pained. "That's the question." Silence hovered between them, laden with unspoken memories of closeness and heartbreak. Finally, Daenerys sighed. "You face the same dilemma in the North. The lords want a line of succession, a name to rally behind. If you remain unwed, they'll press Sansa or Arya, or they might look elsewhere." He managed a wry smile. "Sansa is more skilled at politics than I am. And Arya, well, she's not exactly one for sitting on a throne. Yet the North respects them both. For me, I've never sought power. I fought for the living, for the people I love. Succession feels like a far-off worry, yet I know it matters." Daenerys reached for her cup and took a small sip, letting the warmth of the wine steady her nerves. "I'll address the realm when the time is right, Clarify that the new system of governance might allow for a great council to choose an heir if I leave none. That would help avoid a war of succession. But many lords resist the idea of an elective monarchy. They want certainty. John nodded. Yet we might have to show them that times have changed. The traditions of inheritance by blood alone have caused countless wars. Perhaps a chosen successor, based on merit, would serve better. Daenerys took a moment to let that thought settle. A great council to choose the next ruler, like the one that had once seated King Aegon VI in a different era. She had always assumed she would establish a line of Targaryen heirs, but perhaps this was the next step in breaking the wheel. If we can persuade enough of the realm's leading houses to accept such a method, it could be a solution. It would require trust and cooperation beyond anything Westeros has ever known. Joan's eyes carried a hint of hope. We've come this far. She allowed herself a small smile. Yes, we have. She set down her cup, rising. I'll discuss the idea with my council, with the other regions, and perhaps we can draft a proposal. It won't be easy, but we've done the impossible before. He stood as well, though he lingered a moment, as if reluctant to leave. Thank you for hearing me out. The North is grateful for your willingness to consider all possibilities. Daenerys studied him, reminded of the day they had first stood in this castle. He an uncertain king in the North, she a determined queen of the Seven Kingdoms, each suspicious of the other. And here they were, shaped by battles and heartbreak, forging something new. We do what we must for the good of the realm. He nodded, then offered a slight bow. I'll see you at the council on the morrow. She watched him depart, feeling a swirl of emotions. Even with peace, so many knots remained in the tapestry of Westeros. Yet perhaps this new conversation about a chosen successor might be the next thread that could strengthen the fabric. The mere notion was radical, an end to the absolute primacy of bloodlines. But Daenerys was no stranger to radical change. She had once broken chains across the narrow sea. Now she was trying to break an entire realm's cycle of war and tyranny. The next day dawned bright and warm, a haze of summer heat settling over the city. Daenerys convened her council. Tyrion, Varys, Missandei, Grey Worm, and a few other key advisors from various parts of the realm, including Gendry Baratheon, who had come to King's Landing to finalize trade agreements with the Riverlands. The meeting began as usual, discussing shipments of grain, the coordination of watch patrols, the distribution of coin for rebuilding efforts. Then Daenerys took a breath and broached the subject of succession. She looked around the table, meeting each set of eyes. We have forged a new realm by forging peace. But we must look beyond our own lifetimes. The question arises, who will rule after me if I cannot produce an heir? Now A hush fell. Tyrion's eyes darted between the others, clearly aware of how charged this issue was. Gendry frowned, fiddling with a quill. Missandei maintained a poised silence, while Varys tilted his head, ever the watchful spider. Grey Worm stood by the wall, stoic but attentive. Daenerys continued. One possibility is to allow a great council to choose a successor when the time comes, rather than relying solely on the Targaryen line. This idea may shock many lords, but it could prevent another dance of claimants, as we've seen so many times in history. Tyrion cleared his throat. It would certainly be unprecedented in the Seven Kingdoms, but not entirely. A great council decided the matter of succession once, long ago. Still, lords cling to tradition like barnacles to a ship. Gendry shifted. But tradition is what nearly destroyed the realm in the last war. The question of who deserved the throne by right of blood led to Cersei's ascendancy, then Daenerys' intervention, then a great conflict. If we can avoid that in the future, I'm in favor. Missandei spoke in her soft voice. In Essos, some city-states choose their rulers through councils or elections. It is not unknown in this world, but Westerosi lords may resist. They will fear losing their own claims and lines of inheritance. True, Varys said. Yet with the realm only newly at peace, if we present this too abruptly, it could spark anxiety and suspicion. Perhaps we could propose it gradually, as a contingency, that if her grace passes without a living heir, the Lord shall assemble to choose the next ruler by consensus. In the meantime, if her grace does have an heir, that child would presumably inherit. Now, Daenerys inclined her head. That is my thought. We do not discard the possibility of a blood heir, if one should come. But we also ensure the realm is not left in chaos if that does not happen. Tyrion folded his hands. We will need to prepare the other houses carefully. Cersei, especially, may see this as a threat to her own ambitions. House Lannister's hold on the Westerlands could become less secure if inheritance is no longer paramount. But we might argue that it protects them as well, preventing the crown from passing to a rival house that might punish the Lannisters out of spite. Daenerys noted Grey Worm's slight frown, as though the political intricacies perplexed him. She recalled that in the Unsullied's old world, kings and queens meant little, only orders. Now he was learning a realm's worth of nuance. We must proceed carefully, Daenerys said. I will broach the subject with Cersei, but I need a united front among my council. Gendry gave a quick nod. You have my support, Your Grace. The Stormlands stand behind you. Nayen. Missandei murmured her agreement. Varys offered a small smile. Tyrion still appeared thoughtful, but he said, You know I am with you. Thank you, Daenerys said, acknowledging them all. We'll prepare a formal proposal. In the coming weeks, we can invite the major lords to King's Landing for a gathering, a chance to discuss the future of the realm. We won't call it a council on succession, but rather a council on the realm's ongoing unity. Gradually, we'll introduce the idea. That resolved, the council moved on to other matters, but Daenerys could sense the tension that lay beneath. Change on this scale would not come easily. Yet the realm had already undergone a transformation that few would have believed possible. Perhaps one more step was not beyond reach. Later that day, she arranged a meeting with Cersei in a side chamber, overlooking the gardens. Cersei arrived with the sweep of her burgundy skirts, a single guard trailing behind. Daenerys had Missandei with her, but no one else. She wanted a certain level of intimacy for a conversation that could spark conflict. They exchanged polite greetings, then stood at a table where a pitcher of chilled wine waited. Outside the window, a warm breeze ruffled the greenery, carrying the scent of newly flowering bushes, imported from the Reach, rumored to be a hybrid of rose and goldenrod. Cersei's gaze lingered on them, then shifted to Daenerys. You said you wished to speak privately, Cersei said. I assume this is about something that cannot be shared before the full council. Daenerys took a moment to gauge Cersei's mood. It concerns the future of the realm, my succession to be precise. Cersei's eyes narrowed slightly. Ah. The question of heirs. I suspected this would arise eventually. I take it you're not pregnant then? The way she said it was coolly clinical, with a faint edge of mockery. Daenerys forced herself not to bristle. No, Dottie. And I've come to accept that it may or may not happen. In the event that I have no direct heir, I am contemplating a contingency plan. A great council that would select the next monarch, ensuring no single house can lay exclusive claim. Cersei listened without revealing much, though Daenerys saw a muscle tighten in her jaw. So you would cast aside centuries of inheritance by blood, upend the entire foundation of monarchy. You are as radical as your reputation suggests. Daenerys leveled her gaze. I am mindful of what blood-based succession has wrought. Wars, rivalry, countless deaths. If the realm is truly to remain united, we must avoid a future war of succession. I will not force the lords to accept an elective monarchy outright, but I propose it as a safeguard. No. Cersei took a slow breath. And you expect me to bless this? House Lannister has always relied on the continuity of inheritance. My father's entire life was spent building our dynasty. Yes, Daenerys said plainly. I do expect your cooperation because you claim to care for the realm's stability. A war of succession could shatter everything we've built, leaving even House Lannister vulnerable. This plan protects everyone. Meaning? For a long moment, Cersei was silent. She moved to the table, poured herself a small cup of wine, and sipped. Daenerys waited, her own heart pounding. Finally, Cersei turned, her green eyes colder than winter's frost. "I see the logic in it. But do not think I'll give up Lannister interests so easily. If a great council is to convene, House Lannister will demand a prominent voice." "You would have one," Daenerys replied. "As Queen in the West, your influence is assured." Cersei's lips curved in a faint, bitter smile. "Then I suppose we have no choice but to accept. Though I wonder, you think the other lords will embrace this? The North, perhaps. But the Baratheon boy is eager for recognition of his birthright. The Tullys are uncertain. The Vale is conservative, and Dorne trusts no one. You may find yourself with more trouble than you bargained for." "I am prepared to persuade them," Daenerys said, refusing to be intimidated. "And I trust you will stand by your word to preserve the realm's unity. Unless, of course, you hope for a future scramble over my empty throne." "Now, Marie, Nivier." Cersei's gaze flicked with a hint of anger, but her voice remained composed. "I would prefer not to see another war. Targaryen. War has cost me everything I loved. But do not ask me to delight in seeing old traditions thrown on the pyre." Daenerys inclined her head. "I understand. We'll proceed carefully. Thank you for hearing me out." Cersei finished her wine. Setting the cup down with a soft clink, she said, "You and your council can draft this proposal. I will review it. If it seems fair, I'll lend my voice. But be warned, if it becomes a tool for others to undermine House Lannister, I'll withdraw my support." "Dawero? Edsim." "So noted," Daenerys said. "Your perspective will be accounted for." With that, Cersei turned and swept out, her guard trailing behind. Daenerys exhaled, shoulders sagging slightly once the lioness was gone. Then she glanced at Missandei, who had remained by the window, alert and watchful. "That was less explosive than I feared," Daenerys murmured. Missandei nodded gently. "She's not happy, but she sees reason. That may be the best we can hope for from Queen Cersei." "Nayin." "Yes." Daenerys gazed out at the garden, letting her pulse settle. The conversation had gone better than expected. Cersei was not championing the cause, but she was not obstructing it either. At least, not yet. It was a fragile acceptance, like so much in this new Westeros. That night, Daenerys found herself in the Great Hall once more, presiding over a small feast to welcome Lord Royce from the Vale and a few other visiting nobles. The hall's echoing columns still bore scars from the final battles, but they had been partially plastered and repainted. Musicians played subdued melodies. Cersei attended but kept mostly silent, sipping her wine. Tyrion engaged Lord Royce in conversation about hillside bandits. Gendry discussed blacksmithing methods with a curious Vale knight. It was a scene that, a year prior, Daenerys could never have imagined. Lannisters, Targaryens, Baratheons, men of the Vale, all breaking bread under a single roof, without animosity thickening the air. She scanned the crowd and caught glimpses of small folk and minor courtiers behind the main tables, some wearing new clothes provided by the Crown's weaving initiatives, part of the ongoing efforts to stimulate trade and employment in the city. She recognized the cautious spark in their eyes, the hope that maybe life would improve, if only the peace held. A wave of determination washed over her. She would do everything in her power to ensure that it did. As the evening wore on, Daenerys excused herself from the dais to walk among the guests. She passed by where Jon Snow was seated with Sansa Stark, who had arrived that morning, and Sir Davos. Sansa looked regal, her auburn hair piled elegantly. When she saw Daenerys, she rose and inclined her head, a polite smile curving her lips. The flickering torchlight danced on her pale skin. "Queen Daenerys," Sansa said. "It's good to see you again." Daenerys returned the smile. "And you, Lady Stark, or should I say, Lady of Winterfell. Word is the North thrives under your guidance." Sansa's gaze shifted to Jon with a subtle warmth. "We do what we can. Winterfell is still in the process of repairing its outer walls, but the harvest this year looks promising." "Now, Cersei." Daenerys nodded. I'm glad. Please know that if you need further support, you have only to ask. The crown stands ready." Sansa thanked her, then turned to watch as a pair of dancers moved through the center of the hall, performing a lively jig. Music and laughter rose, weaving a tapestry of festivity. For a brief moment, Daenerys let herself enjoy the scene. This, she thought, is what peace looks like. Highborn and low, gathered in relative harmony. A sharp sense of longing tugged at her. She wished Ser Jorah could have seen this, that he might have witnessed a realm on the mend, a queen who had learned from her mistakes. She wished her dragons could soar overhead without being seen as weapons of terror. Rhaegal still flew, though not as powerfully as Drogon, and the city folk had grown slightly accustomed to them. Just enough that children sometimes ran onto rooftops to catch a glimpse of the beasts. But so many losses marked her path. She tried not to dwell on them tonight. Eventually, the feast wound down, and Daenerys returned to her chambers. She took a moment to stand on the balcony, the city illuminated by moonlight. The stench of the old slums had lessened with new sanitation measures, yet the faint underlying smell of fish and sweat lingered, always reminding her this was a living city, not just a monument. She listened to the distant hum of late-night revelers, the clang of a blacksmith working by torchlight, the bark of a dog. Each sound was a testament that life went on. Peace had made that possible. She slept fitfully, dreaming of vast open skies where dragons once soared. She dreamt of 1,000 swords melting into something else, something kinder. When she woke, the dawnlight found her restless but resolute. The next days and weeks would be critical. She would host lords from across the realm to discuss the new measure of a great council if she left no heir. She would do her utmost to quell any pockets of violence or sabotage. And she would keep forging ties with Cersei, bridging mutual distrust with cautious pragmatism. The days stretched into weeks, and lords arrived in King's Landing from near and far. The great hall was never empty, with petitioners seeking an audience at all hours. Daenerys held court with Cersei at her side, a united front that unnerved some visitors, but reassured others. Gradually, talk of the proposed contingency took shape. Some lords immediately opposed the idea, clinging to the tradition of rightful inheritance. Others, especially those without strong hereditary claims, viewed the notion of a great council with optimism. It became the topic of countless conversations in taverns, alleyways, and noble manors. Whispers circulated about who might be elected if Daenerys had no heir. Names such as Jon Snow, Gendry Baratheon, and even Sansa Stark were bandied about, while some rumored the realm might want a neutral candidate from outside the Seven Kingdoms. All of it seemed strange and new. Throughout this flurry of activity, Daenerys juggled 100 other tasks. She oversaw the final phases of the city's reconstruction, granted charters to new guilds, managed trade disputes, and coordinated with the North to address the raiders along the Gift. Letters from Yara Greyjoy suggested progress in routing the pirates, though they had lost a few ships. Gold began trickling from Highgarden's old vaults, enough to placate the Braavosi bankers for now. The realm was far from perfect. There were bandits in the Riverlands, tensions in Dorne, and pockets of famine along the Reach's edges. But every day that passed without a major outbreak of violence was a minor miracle. One evening, Daenerys found a rare lull. She walked the upper battlements of the Red Keep, the setting sun painting the city in gold and crimson. She came upon Cersei, standing at one of the lookout points, staring west. A warm breeze stirred the lioness's hair, now grown to brush her shoulders. Her gown was subdued in color, a shade of wine red that blended with the dusk. Daenerys slowed her approach, uncertain if Cersei wanted company. But the older queen heard her footsteps and turned slightly, offering a faint nod. They stood side by side, looking out at the city. From here, Daenerys could see scaffolds on distant rooftops, the new spires rising. The black scars from her dragon's fire were less visible now, paved over or rebuilt. Yet memory remained. She placed her hands on the stone parapet, feeling its warmth fade into coolness as the night advanced. After a long silence, Cersei spoke in a low voice. "I remember standing here once, looking down at the city after my father died, after my children were gone. I felt such rage at the world. I wanted to burn it all." Daenerys listened, her pulse quickening at the echo of her own darkest thoughts once upon a time. "And now," Cersei exhaled, "now, I see a city that refuses to die. Like a weed, it grows back no matter how many times it's trampled. I'm tired of trying to kill it. Tired of war." Daenerys found no immediate words. There was a time she had believed Cersei to be incapable of true remorse. Perhaps she still was, but time had eroded some of her sharper edges. "Then maybe it's time to nurture it instead," Daenerys said softly. "To let it grow into something better." Cersei's gaze flicked over to Daenerys. "You really believe that's possible?" Daenerys drew a steadying breath. "I do, or I must, or else everything we've done is for nothing." Cersei nodded slowly. She turned her attention back to the horizon, where a faint streak of orange marked the sun's dying light. "They say the new harvest in the Riverlands looks good. That the fields in the Reach show promise too. Maybe the next generation will have a better life." "No, Brandon." "Maybe," Daenerys agreed. She studied Cersei's profile, a face etched with loss and cunning, a will that had refused to break. In that moment, Daenerys realized that forging peace with an enemy was not just a political arrangement, but a deeply personal journey toward understanding. She might never trust Cersei fully, but she could see the humanity behind the lion's mask. They both had lost children. They both had been shaped by cruelty. They both had dreamed of a throne that ultimately cost them more than they could imagine. They stood there in companionable silence until the light fully vanished. Then Cersei stepped back. "Good night, Daenerys." Daenerys nodded. "Good night, Cersei." There was a quiet gravity in using each other's given names, a recognition of their uneasy partnership. Cersei departed, and Daenerys lingered a moment, letting the night settle over her. Far below, the city lamps twinkled. The wind carried faint shouts, distant laughter, the constant heartbeat of a capital that had endured so much. She felt for once a sense of guarded optimism blooming in her chest. The weeks turned into months. A slow but steady acceptance of the proposed Great Council plan began to take hold, though pockets of dissent remained. With the realm's harvest improving, the immediate threat of famine receded, reducing tensions. Yara Greyjoy succeeded in crushing the pirate threat along the western coasts, earning praise and coin from the crown. Jon Snow and Sansa managed to quell the raiders in the north, capturing a ragtag band of outlaws who claimed to follow a shadowy figure known only as the Black Stag, some rumored pretender with a flimsy Baratheon connection. Gendry dismissed it as nonsense, and the matter fizzled. Cersei traveled to Casterly Rock for several weeks, overseeing improvements and ensuring her bannermen stayed loyal. She returned with a modest tribute of gold to the crown's coffers, demonstrating that House Lannister would indeed contribute fairly. As the realm recovered, Daenerys felt an undercurrent of restlessness. Peace was a constant balancing act, and she found herself yearning for the day when the realm could stand on its own feet without her guiding hand. She began to wonder what role she would play if ever the system of governance truly matured. Would she one day step aside, letting a successor chosen by the lords take over? Or would she remain queen until her final breath, hoping an heir might emerge? The questions had no easy answers. In the meantime, she labored diligently. She approved new laws to punish corruption in local governance, supported an initiative to restore libraries and knowledge ravaged by war, and encouraged a new generation of maesters to learn from the mistakes of the past. She held audiences with knights seeking to form an order dedicated to protecting the poor. She listened to the plight of farmers, merchants, and foreign envoys. Through it all, she never stopped reminding herself that the peace they enjoyed was a fragile gift, one that required constant vigilance. One autumn evening, she took Drogon on a flight across the Crownlands. The sky flamed with the dying colors of day as she soared above farmland, turning golden in the waning warmth. Distant rivers reflected the sunlight like veins of molten metal. Below, peasants paused in their fields, shading their eyes to watch the great dragon pass overhead. Some cheered, waving. Others cowered, but none broke out in panic. It was a small but significant sign that the people had grown used to the presence of dragons, guardians rather than destroyers, she hoped. She spotted a newly built granary near a crossroads, a symbol of reconstruction. Smoke curled from the chimneys of nearby cottages, where families prepared supper. Could these folk truly be free from the cycle of war and vengeance that had plagued Westeros for generations? She prayed it might be so. Stroking Drogon's obsidian scales, she guided him in a wide arc, letting him fly at a leisurely pace until the sun sank beneath the horizon. Then she turned back toward King's Landing, the castle's lights gleaming like a beacon. Landing in the courtyard, she dismounted carefully. Several Unsullied rushed to attend to Drogon, offering fresh meat from a butchered cow. Daenerys patted the beast's side, murmuring soothing words. Drogon rumbled contentedly, devouring his meal. The yard bustled with evening activity, soldiers crossing to the barracks, servants moving supplies. She felt a certain pride at how the Red Keep was no longer a place of fear alone, but also a seat of genuine governance. Stepping into the hall, she was met by Tyrion, who bore a letter sealed in black wax. "This arrived from the east, your grace," he said, his brow furrowed. "From Volantis, apparently." She took it, curious. "We have trade ships there, but rarely letters. Are we expecting some treaty?" "Not that I know of," Tyrion said. "But the seal is unknown to me. I thought you should see it immediately." "Not none." Daenerys broke the seal and scanned the contents by torchlight. The letter was brief, written in a flowing Essosi script. It introduced its sender as the Triarch of Volantis, one Jal Zaro, who claimed to speak for a coalition of powerful interests in the Free Cities. The letter congratulated Daenerys on unifying Westeros, but hinted at concerns that her realm's stability might threaten trade across the narrow sea. The writer proposed a meeting, a grand summit of sorts, in which the rulers of Westeros and representatives of several free cities could discuss mutual interests and possibly forge a new alliance to prevent future conflicts. The letter was polite, but carried an undercurrent of challenge. Daenerys could almost feel the sharpened edge behind the compliments. She frowned. A meeting with triarchs from Volantis, and who else? Bravos, Pentos, Lys Mare. They've seldom cooperated. This is unusual. Tyrion rubbed his chin. Volantis has historically sought to expand its influence. Perhaps they see an opportunity now that Westeros is stable, or they fear a strong Westeros might overshadow them. Either way, they must want something. Nay. But Daenerys considered. It might be an opening to ensure peace across the sea as well, but it could also be a trap, or an attempt to pry concessions from us. Tyrion nodded. We don't have to decide immediately, but ignoring them could provoke tension. The free cities might interpret it as a snub and unify against us economically. Daenerys sighed. I'll consult the council. For now, send a polite reply acknowledging their invitation. We'll weigh our options. She folded the letter, inwardly bracing for another layer of complexity. Peace in Westeros was already a monumental task. Extending that peace to Essos, or dealing with their labyrinth of city-states, might prove even more daunting. That night, she lay awake, thinking of how the realm she ruled was not an island unto itself. Across the sea lay old powers, new intrigues, and endless possibilities for conflict or cooperation. If she truly wanted to break the wheel of tyranny and war, perhaps she needed to look beyond Westeros shores. But that was a battle for another day. Morning found her at the painted table, newly installed in a refurbished strategy room within the Red Keep. Modeled after the famous table at Dragonstone, this one displayed the 7 kingdoms in detailed relief. She stood with Missandei, Tyrion, Varys, and a few others discussing the letter from Volantis. In the window's light, dust motes danced, and the smell of parchment and ink filled the air. We must be cautious, Varys murmured, but not so wary that we slam the door. The free cities still bristle at your history of liberating slaves. Some might hold grudges or see you as a threat to their commerce. Reaching an understanding could be beneficial, or at least keep them from meddling in Westerosi affairs. Tyrion concurred. A diplomatic meeting could also be a chance to explore new trade routes, attract more investment. But we'd want some guarantee of safety. Traveling to Volantis or hosting them here? Daenerys traced a finger over the eastern edge of the painted table, where the outline of Essos began, though it was less detailed. If we travel to them, we'd be at their mercy. If they come here, we might risk them seeing Westeros' recovering state, perhaps scoping out weaknesses. A neutral site might be best, perhaps a location in the narrow sea. Or we could propose Dragonstone, though that's practically my territory. Nisande spoke carefully. A compromise could be Bravos. The Iron Bank might host the summit, ensuring a degree of neutrality. Of course, that could place them in a position of power. Daenerys weighed the idea. We have some measure of rapport with the Iron Bank now. They might relish the chance to play mediator. That also means we owe them another favor. Nedun? When? The conversation meandered through possible options. In the end, they agreed to keep the letter private for now, and to suggest that the Triarch of Volantis send an envoy to King's Landing for initial talks. Only after those discussions would they consider a larger summit. That was the measured approach, feel out their intentions before committing to anything grand. By the time the council disbanded, Daenerys' head buzzed with possibilities. The future stretched out like an uncharted sea, full of promise and peril. She found a moment to slip away to the gardens, seeking a breath of fresh air among the blossoming shrubs. The day was crisp, with the faint tang of autumn on the breeze. As she strolled a gravel path, her mind churned with visions of a realm and a world on the cusp of a new era, where old grudges might give way to collaboration if guided wisely. She paused by a small marble bench, noticing a single red flower in bloom, resilient despite the cooling weather. Bending, she touched its petals gently, marveling at its vibrant color. For a fleeting instant, she thought of the red door from her childhood memory, of the innocence she had once known before the cruelty of the world shaped her. She closed her eyes, inhaling the flower's scent, letting it remind her why she did all this. For life, for beauty, for the hope that the next generation need not be burned by the same fires. A quiet step behind her made her straighten. She turned to see Cersei approaching, her expression veiled as always, but less guarded than it once was. They stood among the flowers, a tapestry of red and green surrounding them. Daenerys felt the hush of the moment, neither queen speaking. Then softly, Cersei asked, "Do you really believe we can build a realm that endures? One that doesn't unravel the moment we die?" Daenerys looked at the flower, then at Cersei. "I believe we can try. And if we fail, at least we fail having planted seeds that might blossom after us." Cersei was silent for a heartbeat. Then she inclined her head, almost a gesture of respect. "Let us hope so, Targaryen." Daenerys gently plucked the flower and handed it to her. Cersei hesitated before accepting. It was a small, wordless exchange, a fragile symbol of the peace they had forged and continued to nurture, day by day. They walked back toward the Red Keep together, each carrying her burdens, each determined to hold the realm together through faith, strategy, and the memory of every sacrifice that had brought them here. If the future was a long and uncertain road, they would tread it step by step, forging onward to ensure that Westeros, scarred though it was, might finally learn to live without the endless shadow of war. And in that hopeful dusk, with the faint perfume of a single red bloom lingering in the air, the Dragon Queen and the Lioness shared the fragile gift of peace, determined to guard it against every storm the world might yet unleash.